This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
It's 3 minutes after 10. A very good morning indeed to you. It's probably my second favourite, but we've never done it before on the programme, as in memories from my school days that inform the way I do my job today. You're familiar with What Was It Like? I'm not telling the whole story, but it underpins the philosophy, if we dared to be grand enough to suggest that this programme, this radio entertainment, has anything akin to a philosophy. What was it like is a crucial part of the time we spend together, because whatever the subject is, if somebody has lived it, their recollections, their descriptions of what it was like. I don't know if you were listening yesterday to that extraordinary woman who described leaving, was it Sammy in Leeds, described leaving her husband and the way her life bloomed and blossomed as a consequence of that. It was always going to be a million times more compelling and more interesting than people ringing in with an opinion about the subject that was under discussion. Well, maybe not always, but most of the time. What was it like is the question that brings the best possible responses. But on a much lower level, questions to which the answer used to be duh. Do you remember? You remember that? Someone was, you'd ask a question like, why does that happen? And someone would go, duh, as if everybody should know the answer, as if it was blooming obvious, as if it was crystal clear why something happens, why we do something, why X equals Y plus 2, whatever it might be. If you ask a stupid question, if you're anything even remotely close to my age, you would answer duh. Duh. Duh brain, I think, was the noun that came from the sound effect. You would be adjudged a duh brain if you asked something stupid. You see, foolishly, to knit these two things together, I think that we regarded the lad at school who coined the phrase, what was it like? I think we regarded him as a bit of a duh brain, but as we've discussed many times in the past, in fact, that's a question of such extraordinary perspicacity that we don't notice its brilliance at the time. And I love questions to which the answer is duh. So Mystery Hour, which we do every Thursday on this programme, so popular it's spawned its own board game, was born in the space usually occupied by the bleeding obvious. I think one of the very first questions that made me think maybe we could do something every week that addresses the sublime, the silly and the serious. I think one of the very first questions we ever did was, why is gold valuable? To which you could be forgiven for responding, duh, you duh brain, O'Brien, James O'Duh brain. But why is gold valuable? See? It's not immediately obvious. Don't ring in. That's not the phone in. I don't know whether we will reach 11 o'clock this morning and conclude that this was a question of similar layers, a question that lends itself to similar sort of contemplations. But leaving aside the rather obvious question of whether it's a good idea to tell the world that we're not ready to defend ourselves, which is the conclusion of a year-long inquiry by the Commons Defence Committee, warning that Labour is moving at a glacial pace in the face of renewed threats from Russia and China. Also failing to meet our NATO Article 3 defence obligations to maintain and develop individual and collective capacity to resist armed attack. Now, I don't think it addresses the prospect or the possibility of a sort of an actual invasion. But here we are. We are not able to defend ourselves from, I guess, what you might call state-sanctioned terror attacks, or perhaps the kind of thing that we've witnessed in Poland, where people have, fans of Russia, fans of Vladimir Putin, have been trying to commit sabotage on Polish territory. So these tentacles reach far. But I was sitting here thinking, what am I going to ask you this morning? Am I going to ask you whether you are frightened of being invaded? Whether you are frightened of being invaded? Do you actually... There was a thing last year, I don't know if you remember it, when I didn't get my head around this. I've got to be honest with you. It was one of those things that didn't... I mean, I was aware of it, but I did not understand it. There was a thing last year where young men, apparently, were constantly thinking about the Roman Empire. Do you remember this? It was a meme. It was a craze. It was a fad. Everywhere you went, people were... How many times a day do you think about the Roman Empire? And I never got that. I sat here feeling a bit like my dad did when I got off the bus at Digbeth coach station in Birmingham, wearing my recently purchased Pride and Joy of jeans that already had holes in them that I'd bought, I think, from Hyper on Kensington High Street. And my dad was just absolutely baffled. He goes, so you've done what, son? You've bought someone else's old kecks that have already got holes in them. I said, designer holes, Dad. Designer holes. And he was, I mean, probably a slight combination of love and befuddlement. But he was just completely baffled. It was as if there were no words in the English language that I could deploy to help him understand why I'd spent, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that I think we may have spent more money on somebody else's old Levi's 501s with holes in them than we would have been required to spend on a brand spanking new pair straight out of the box. I may have misremembered that, but they were no bargain, especially not from a lad up on the bus from Kidderminster with his hard-earned pocket money clutched in his sweaty paw. And then I hopped off the National Express at Digbeth coach station, and my dad was picking me up. And I was wearing these jeans that I just adored. I thought I looked like the absolute bomb, like a cross between Matt Goss and George Michael. My dad, I mean, went to his grave, bless him, utterly baffled by the notion of buying jeans that somebody else's old jeans that already had holes in them. And I felt like that when this thing last year went around the world about how often men are supposed to think about the Roman Empire. Because I really like history, and very occasionally, if I see a very, very straight road, you know, the kind of road that could have gone round a hill, or I always think of Stokenchurch at this point, or could have gone through a hill, not perhaps in Roman times, because they'd have had to do it by hand, but, you know, post-industrial revolution, they could have blown a cutting through the middle of a hill. But the Romans just did it. This is what we were taught at school. I think it's true. The Romans just did a big straight road. They wouldn't go through anything. They would just, you know, heads down, tools out, build a road in a great... So whenever I find myself on an uncommonly straight road, I occasionally think of the Roman Empire. And those are the reasons, in a very roundabout way, why I like the questions to which the answer appears to be blindingly obvious. So today I was going to ask you how often you thought about being invaded, in the way that everybody got asked last year how often they thought about the Roman Empire. But I don't know that anybody lies awake in bed at night genuinely worrying about what would happen in the event of an invasion. As a kid I did. As a kid reading Commando comics. Do you remember Commando comics? For you, Fritz, the war is over. All sorts of lovely stories. Do you think the Defence Secretary does? Do you think John Healey lies awake in bed wondering what would happen if, I don't know, if they arrived at Dover tomorrow? Who's they? It'd be the Russians, right, these days? The Russians arrived at Dover tomorrow. I think he does. I think he does worry about it. I think he may even be talking about it at the moment. But I don't know anyone else who does. The realistic prospect. When I was growing up, it was always the Nazis. Do you want to know something funny? I don't know why I've dug up my school days today. Must be something in the water. We had air rifles in locked cupboards at my prep school. Okay, so it was a very old-fashioned, posh prep school, and we used to do shooting with the major, former military, would teach us shooting with air pistols. And in my fevered imagination, aged about 8 or 9, if the Nazis invaded, I was going to run to the old gym, it was called, like a wooden building, probably dating back to roughly the Second World War, and I was going to crack out the air rifles and lead my mates into the woods where we would build a redoubt and set up a final line of defence as the Nazis made their way through Chattersley Corbett. They would meet their they would meet their comeuppance when they got into the woods behind my old school. That's what I would do. So that's the last time I genuinely thought about the prospect of this country being invaded. Poland, breaking news, is closing its last operating Russian consulate. The threat is growing. The threat is new. But instead of asking you whether or not you genuinely fear invasion, well, I'll ask that, but I don't think anyone's going to be worth listening to. Can I say that? 0345 6060 973 if you genuinely worry, for good reasons, not just because you're paranoid, about the prospect of these shores being breached, these islands being invaded. I can tell you that John Healy, who is speaking now at Downing Street, has said that a Russian spy ship is on the edge of UK waters north of Scotland, having entered the UK's wider waters over the last few weeks. This is a vessel designed for gathering intelligence and mapping our undersea cables. We deployed a Royal Navy frigate and RAF planes to monitor and track this vessel's every move, during which the Yantar directed lasers at our pilots. So Russian lasers currently directed or recently directed at British pilots. And it's the second time this year that this ship, the Yantar, has deployed to UK waters. Now, that's obviously very serious, but I don't think it merits yet the word invasion. In many ways, if you're tracking cyber matters, war was declared years ago. War was declared in about 2014, 2015. You can see it with the way that public discourse has been completely distorted and corrupted in this country. And no one will ever know, I don't think, how much of the Britain-hating racism all over social media, whether it's pretending that London is less safe than Washington, D.C., or simply telling lies about people whose parents weren't born here. We'll never know how much of that has its seeds in Russian misinformation, but as with Brexit, we know that a lot of it does. And John Healy has just addressed Vladimir Putin directly, which I'll play to you in a moment. And then I'm going to ask you what our army is for, what our armed forces are for. Have a little listen to this very, very short clip.
So my message to Russia and to Putin is this. We see you. We know what you're doing. And if the Yantar travels south this week, we are ready.
Gosh. Was it Gavin Williamson who said that? Who was he talking about when he said they should shut up and go away? Was that Russia? It wasn't, was it? I can't remember. I can't be expected to remember everything. But that's the question. And it may seem silly, and that's because it may be silly, but I actually don't think it is. Here, if you're not scared already, how about try this for size? I don't think we could rely on Donald Trump's United States. Could we? In the event of us facing genuine military peril? He's cozying up at the moment to the Saudi leader, believed by the American intelligence services to have greenlit the murder of a journalist in Istanbul. Donald Trump deploying all of the sort of arsenal of fake news yesterday to pretend that never happened, or that if it did, it didn't matter. And maligning the memory of Jamal Khashoggi. Again, shocked but not surprised. But what is our army for? What are our armed forces for? And this is a question which everyone should actually have a view on, even though you've never really thought about it before. If you've served, I'm really interested in your answers. Maybe I'm demonstrating a degree of naivety and you will all give the same answer. But I don't fear invasion in the way that I did growing up, oddly. If you were born in the 70s like I was, you never really thought that you were growing up in the shadow of the Second World War, because it was much, much closer to the Second World War when I was born than than I am to when I was born, if you see what I mean. 53 years old, 53 years since I was born. But if you were born in 1972, then the Second World War was 30 years away. Less than 30 years away. It's crazy that, if you're my age, to reflect upon that simple chronological fact. So we did physically grow up in the shadow of the Second World War. And so you grew up 70s, maybe 80s, conscious of the possibility of invasion, aware of the Second World War, aware of Dunkirk and D-Day and all the sort of great signposts of success during that era. But I've never thought about it since. And if we're not in the business, and then you've got the Falklands, so the tiny number of territories over which we still hold sway that would need to be defended in the event of a foreign invasion, I'm not suggesting for a minute that they don't merit the existence of the armed forces, but it's a massive trade-off. What are our armed forces for? 0345 6060 973. For the avoidance of doubt, I am as dewy-eyed and irrational as the next man when it comes to our armed forces and the men and women who serve in them. I just sometimes like asking strange questions. And this is a really good one. What are they actually for? 0345 6060 973. And of course, you can be negative as well.
I don't mean to suggest for a minute that this will be an unalloyed cavalcade of compliments. It could be negative. You could say it's a sort of, I don't know, some form of imperial hangover, a reminder of the days when we mattered a lot more than we do now. Have we needed an army since Suez? Have we needed an army since the Falklands? Have we needed an army since Hiroshima? I don't know. That's why I like these questions. I love the questions that we don't have obvious answers to, but hopefully we have some answers. So, what are our armed forces for? And how concerned should we be that they are apparently not ready to defend us from foreign attack? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
20 minutes after 10. This is not a drill. UK forces hit by lasers while tracking Russian spy ship on edge of UK waters is a real and live headline. The Defence Secretary, John Healey, currently describing the action as deeply dangerous, and it coincides with the culmination of a year-long inquiry into the readiness of our armed forces, and the short answer is that we ain't ready for much. And in framing the question of why or whether that matters in the modern world, I found myself wondering what in the modern world our armed forces are for. And that is the question that we're starting with today. So feel free to answer it. Mick's in Bournemouth. Mick, what do you reckon?
Oh, well, it's good morning, James.
Hello,
First time caller. I mean, it's a multifaceted answer as well, because, primarily our armed forces are for extending government policy via military means.
Yes.
But they've also got civil support duties as well in times of emergency.
Of course.
Let's cast our mind back to COVID, where the logistic support and the medical functional support and also various other support processes were put in place.
Like what? Just remind us what? Perhaps you were about to, and I shouldn't have interrupted.
Let's look at the Nightingale hospitals.
Yes.
Let's look at the medical support staff. There was an enormous amount of military medical staff that augmented NHS staff. We also provided an enormous amount of project management, logistic support, project management skills, where NHS senior managers were very much struggling to find some kind of resolution. So there was a hell of a lot of pain where that was concerned. But we also
there's an exhibit. Sorry to interrupt, but people might like to know this. There's a specific exhibit, I think, at the National Army Museum, a project dedicated to recording. I think 20,000 soldiers were seconded, if you want, or committed to supporting public services during the coronavirus pandemic, which that hadn't popped into my head, because immediately I say, what are the armed forces for? And you immediately think fighting, don't you?
Oh, of course, yeah. Listen, it's a great trope to put a gun in the hand of every single person in uniform. Yes, okay, we have to do the dirty work when all else fails. However, we've got other duties which, let's talk about humanitarian support. Whenever there's a cyclone, a hurricane, an earthquake, the tsunami elsewhere on planet Earth, there's always a grey warship there with a whole load of Marines helicoptering ashore to provide support where that's concerned. And without any, they don't even drop a stitch to do that. It's part of the function of the armed forces.
Just give us a quick bio. Give us a quick bit of why you know what you're talking about, if you don't mind.
I'm over 40 years in uniform in and around the armed forces, also in the working in the defence sector, in the civilian sector as well.
Right.
So I've always had my eyes on the actual task in hand. So that takes me right back to the dark days of the Cold War, where I have seen face to face what the Soviet capability was then.
Yes.
And that is exactly what Putin is aspiring to now, to regain that capability, that kudos in the world, to put the eye of the Russian bear back into Moscow, and his intent in Ukraine is a very, very clear example of that. So we've got to be careful about what we pitch our armed forces against here. There is a capability there, and we need to match it.
And we are not matching it. Well, we can't match Russia, can we? I mean, as a member of NATO, perhaps we can, or as a member of that much mooted European army that certain people told us we should be frightened of for reasons they could never properly articulate. But we can only really match, if you like that word, Russia in company. We can't match it. Never would have been able to, really, not since the 19th century.
But that's the whole principle of deterrence, isn't it? You know, for 90 years now, we've not had we have had European wars, but we have not had a significant pan-European war for nearly 90 years now. And that has come as a result of deterrent, both conventional and nuclear. And also, let's look towards the future. Cyber is now a massive problem. The Russians have the capability, so do the Chinese. You know, let's not just pitch this at the Russians. Let's pitch this at the Chinese, also other rogue states, to shut us down functionally. Think about the financial district. Think about the logistics capability nationwide and also throughout the world.
How does the army? How does the army play into that? Because you're picking up on a point Farah makes in a text. Hang on, I'll just read this. Physical invasion isn't what worries me. State-sponsored cyber attacks on our NHS, our financial markets, taking over our control of our airspace. That would cause much more death, economic pain and danger. Technology has made us strong, but also very vulnerable. But this is the line I want you to respond to. A physical army isn't a strong enough defence against technology terrorism.
Right, so we're fighting on two fronts, aren't we now? So, you know, if we take military history back 500-600 years, we were fighting on a different battle space. This battle space now is also physical and virtual. So, you know, I can say from experience now that all three armed forces and their reservists are very, very hot now on cyber capability. You know, they're looking at what the threat capability is of nation states who are against us, who have the capability to shut us down, not just from a civil point of view, but also from a battle space point of view as well. So it is something that we have got in our gun sight at the moment, for want of a better word. We're looking at this and we're training our staff and trying to gain capability to do so. Don't forget, we're in times of very tight budgets, and every single pound is fought for by our Defence Secretary.
And let me steer you now towards the more traditional territory, which would involve Professor Peter Roberts telling the inquiry that the public needed to know just how at risk they were owing to Britain's lack of missile defence, of which the UK currently has next to nothing. Why would we need missiles?
Well, let's face it, the Soviets and the Chinese have got the capability of hypervelocity missiles. These are missiles that travel well beyond our detection rates and give us very short spaces of time to actually detect, intercept and neutralise. So we've got to be well aware about what our capabilities are with regards to defence of that, not just from an island state such as us, but also our dependencies and also our responsibilities throughout the world, and also Europe as a you know, to basically put a bubble up. You've only to look at the capability of the Iranians to hit Israel from distance, and also vice versa from the Houthis also to launch missiles through hundreds of miles, and we are literally a mere heartbeat away from Russian territory and Russian soil. And also, we have submarines off our coast, Russian submarines who've got the capability to launch these things. There's a spy ship, as you say, which is off the coast of Scotland at the moment. That really is a bit of a red herring. We've always got spy ships around our waters, and also, you know, espionage going on at a rate anyway within our territory itself. So we're always being surveyed, but it's the missile capability which should be of some concern.
I'm really hoping you haven't shut down the entire phone-in by being the best caller that we've had in a while on any issues related to this. Go on.
I've got to be honest, James, there's a lot of things that me and you would disagree on.
Don't spoil it. Don't spoil it. Don't spoil it, Mick. This is a bromance. Don't spoil it. Because what I want to close with is a question, really a personal one to you, rather than calling on your professional expertise, which is on the sort of, on the gradation of peril and drawing on that 46 years you've spent in or adjacent to the armed forces. Where do we sit at the moment? What code are we in the context of how threatened you feel that we are as a country?
On a personal level, I'm concerned, but on a professional level...
More than you were 10 years ago? More than you were 20 years ago?
Yes, very much so. I mean, don't forget, when the wall came down and we got the peace dividend, everybody went flabby and everybody went stale, and we cut a hell of a lot of capability out because we imagined that Russia was now benign, and we imagined that China were our friends. But regimes change, you know, and Putin's not the same person as he was 10 years ago. He's got aspirations towards re-establishing what he sees as a Soviet empire, China is now a prescient threat, and let's not denigrate any other areas around the world that do seem to threaten us. The USA can be deemed as a capability that we need to take into account.
Good
you know,
Lord.
whether or not they do decide to bin themselves out of NATO is a moot point. You know, there are intents to do so from certain political areas within the United States government. So, you know, we've got to be aware that one day we may have to be on our own in a European theatre and stick up for ourselves. And we've got to build capability into that. And increasing the defence budget, as much as people don't like that, they don't like that. And I can sympathise with people's points of view where that's concerned. But it's going to be a very, very bad day when everything goes very, very suddenly quiet and black in Britain because cyber capability has not been up.
Because we haven't paid the bills. Because we haven't kept the subs
Well,
up. We haven't kept, or rather, we haven't paid new bills. We haven't been improving our capability. It's one of the best calls I can remember taking in a very long time. Thank you, mate. And I take some plumbing amazing calls as well. But in the context of filling in gaps in our understanding of issues, that's up there with the very best of them. You don't need to be like Mick to contribute to this conversation. I'm interested in feelings as much as facts when we do a question like this, which, you know, is pretty much the territory of asking you what your understanding is of why we have armed forces. What do you personally think of when you think of them? Because if we haven't got the missiles to defend ourselves, we haven't got the capabilities technologically to defend ourselves, we are moving at a glacial pace in face of the renewed threats that Russia and China represent, and we're edging ever closer to the conclusion that we might be able to answer the question of what they should be for, but they're not really fit for that particular purpose now. 10:31 is the time. Phone lines are open. Dominic Ellis has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
26 minutes to 11. Forgive me, I've spoken about Russia, China, the Falkland Islands, Great Britain and the Roman Empire so far today, and I haven't mentioned Scotland. Well, I mean, except as part of Great Britain, of course, but what an extraordinary result. One of those games last night that even if you're not a football fan, you would have to be made of blancmange not to be moved by the emotion of the moment as Scotland just scored. I mean, look, in the opening minutes of the game, I know I was at a function last night, so I've only seen the highlights, but in the opening minutes of the game, you have what I think is commonly regarded as a worldie. Anything that involves an overhead kick is generally a worldie, a world-class goal. And it arguably wasn't even in the top two goals that were scored by Scotland. 30 years since they qualified for a World Cup, and they're off. They're going to the World Cup. Of course, every silver lining has a cloud. They're going to the World Cup in the United States of America, where Donald Trump has already floated the possibility of moving games in order to inflate lies about American cities. But let's not let that spoil the moment, lads. Absolute joy for all Scottish football fans. And my apologies for not mentioning it sooner. But we're talking about the war, possibly the Third World War. So in the great scheme of things, it's arguably more important. And what our armed forces are for. You know, I was being a bit... Well, I wasn't being glib, I was just being a bit daft. That old meme from last year about how often men think about the Roman Empire. Something still baffles me. But I do sometimes, not often, but I do sometimes think about the Spanish Empire and the Portuguese Empire and the Belgian Empire and even French imperial success. And the reason why I think about it is that I don't know whether those countries are enthralled to their imperial history in the way that we often are. I think I can see the French thinking that they are a major world power, but the Spanish, I genuinely don't know. I'm presumably Franco's success, if fascism is going to rise, then it has to involve some trumpeting about a mythical past. But I don't know whether other European countries that had big empires at various different points, we would go all the way back to the Roman Empire, I suppose, whether or not past glories pollute modern attitudes, whether or not the country thinks it's bigger and more important than it actually is because of the time when half the world was red, in the way that I think we still do. I mean, certainly generationally speaking, the generations older than me still hark back to, I don't know, what the map looked like at the turn of the last century rather than what the map looks like now. But we're not unique by any stretch of the imagination. And I often wonder whether or not if you were Spanish or Portuguese, then there would be significant parts of the population who sort of framed their view of where their country sits in the world today through the lens of where it sat 100, 200, 300, 400 years ago. I find that really interesting, and I think it's relevant to the question we're asking today about what our armed forces are for. You can either take the meta level or the micro level. You can go in on a personal one. Why did you join? It probably wasn't to provide logistical support to public services during a pandemic. I can't imagine there are many people in basic training now or at Sandhurst who are joining the armed forces so that they can drive fire engines in the event of another firefighter strike. But the question of what our armed forces are for encompasses all of those things, as our last caller just demonstrated quite perfectly. Martin is in Bridlington. Martin, what would you like to say?
I'm probably a little bit younger than your last caller. He said a bit that I wanted to say, but I'll put my own take on it.
I'm just going to try and sort your phone line out, mate. I don't. You possibly have gone upstairs or something since you spoke to the producer, but that's easily sorted. Let's go to Germany next. Malcolm is there in Alder. Malcolm, what would you like to say?
Hello.
Hello, Malcolm. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I live in Germany, as you may know.
Yes.
And just to, you mentioned commando pamphlets,
yes.
These comics.
Yes.
As I was in the army, we called them training pamphlets.
Well, they weren't very detailed when it comes to what you do in the event of a modern threat. But I take your point.
They were very basic, but they got the point across. Yeah, I live in Germany. We've noticed the amount of airplanes flying across military, which
really?
is the amount is, and it's worrying because you think, where are they coming from, and there's no information about what's happening and everything like this, and it's worrying. Now the German army has invested 150 billion in future weaponry.
I talked about that at the time because it felt to me like an extraordinary moment, and it didn't go unreported, but it probably didn't, because humans are a weird species, it didn't register in the way that you might have expected it to do. The idea of Germany rearming in Europe would, you know, when we were kids, it would have been unthinkable, whereas now it was unremarkable.
The amount of traffic now, airspace,
that's a bit anecdotal. That's a bit anecdotal, isn't it? I mean, maybe you just live under a flight path and they've changed. I mean, do you really think they're doing more training flights of military aircraft than ever before?
Definitely. Okay. Well, we even get warnings now of low-flying aircraft coming across.
Fair enough. What are our armed forces for?
Defence.
Against?
Pure defence. When I was in the army, that was drilled into us. But the Americans, if we had to push back the Soviet Union, NATO would do that, but the Americans would go further. With regards to Trump and relying on Trump, that won't happen.
I think that's a big shift, isn't it? Since you were in the service, I'm going to ask you a question. And it's going to sound like an aggressive question or an attempted zinger, but I promise you it isn't. It's just coming from a place of curiosity. What were we defending in Iraq?
Good point. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
So it was a zinger. or I mean, in Afghanistan, you could sort of make a case for resisting the Taliban, albeit that didn't exactly go according to plan. But what you couldn't do is make a case as to why we picked that fight and not 30 others on the planet that would have had a similar moral dimension. Over
here in Germany, there's a large amount of people who came from Russia to Germany in the 90s.
Right.
When the wall came down. And then now you've got thousands and thousands of Russian-born people demonstrating in Cologne, Berlin, for Putin.
Really?
Yep.
I didn't know that.
Yep. Which is...
Well, that's slightly unnerving as well, isn't it?
Of course it is, especially when they say, well, look, when the wall came down, there was an agreement that NATO wouldn't expand to the east. Whether that is a written
I don't think
agreement.
I don't think there was. I think that's Putin propaganda, really. Parroted by people like Nigel Farage and the one who took the bribes from the Kremlin stooge.
Someone has to do a bit of research about that, surely.
Well, it's a North Atlantic Treaty Organisation, and sovereign countries would be free to join it, even if they'd previously been in the Warsaw Pact. So I don't think any codified treaty would order sovereign countries to not do something that they wanted to do under a democratic measure at some unspecified point in the future. But, I say that with my full chest and a degree of confidence. But, of course, I mean, you're right. I could be wrong. It just seems unlikely on this particular occasion. Thank you, mate. I'll go back to Martin in Bridlington shortly, but before that, the reason why we're having this conversation, the Russian action, the Defence Secretary has said, have we got that clip? I didn't misremember it. Have we got do you remember the former Defence Secretary who was talking about the Russian threat? Have a listen to John Healey talking about the Russian threat today. This is the Defence Secretary a little bit earlier.
So my message to Russia and to Putin is this. We see you. We know what you're doing. And if the Yantar travels south this week, we are ready.
This isn't Idiot's Corner territory, but Rick has expressed a degree of cynicism about this speech being made in the weeks before the budget. Maybe, but it's the conclusion of a year-long inquiry by the Commons Defence Committee that informs the news coverage. That's got nothing to do with the short-term political calendar and everything to do with the conclusion that Britain is not ready to defend itself against invasion. I wonder how many of us genuinely worry about that. You think about Ukraine and you think about Germany rearming, and you think about the lens through which we have viewed European history throughout our lives. Some major changes have taken place. You think about the United States being a steadfast ally. It's a slightly rose-tinted analysis of their interventions in the First and Second World Wars, but only slightly. That's not reliable anymore. He's too busy cozying up to a bloke who greenlights, according to American intelligence. Donald Trump's currently cozying up to a man who greenlights the murder of journalists. So quite how reliable he would be in the event of major peril is not entirely clear, as it was under almost every previous president of the United States. But I guess what I'm saying is I don't feel it. I don't feel this peril that is being described. I don't have a fear of the UK being invaded, but maybe that just makes me a muppet. Happily, not as big a muppet as this guy.
It is absolutely atrocious and outrageous what Russia did in Salisbury. We have responded to that. Frankly, Russia should go away. It should shut up.
There it is. Is he in the House of Lords now, or is he just a knight? Still in the House of Commons, but he got a knighthood. What a time to be alive.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:48 is the time. I'm with Jonathan. Now, who knew they'd become the good old days when Gavin Williamson was entertaining us with his performance as Secretary of State for Defence? I like this, though, from Jason, who's managed to bring Kidderminster into the conversation. Anybody who can bring Kidderminster into the conversation is going to win a very permanent place, perhaps, in my good books. I do this, he writes in capital letters, talking about imagining as a schoolboy what you would do in the event of an invasion. I often think about the fact that Kiddie, as Kidderminster is affectionately known to its residents, I often think about the fact that Kiddie is in a dip and Brum is very high above sea level. He adds helpfully that West Bromwich Albion has the highest football stadium above sea level in England. So if they did nuclear bomb Birmingham, would the shockwave go above our heads down in Kidderminster, or would it roll downhill? Maybe Kidderminster residents only need a very shallow bunker, but that would make digging easy. I thought it was just me who thought about this stuff, writes Jason in Kiddie, with his bucket and spade in hand. And oddly, for fans of Kidderminster-related trivia, and there may be one out there, there is a dimension to what Jason has added that has historical resonance. There is a former underground military complex in Kidderminster. And lots of people who live in Kidderminster don't even know about it. There's a former underground military complex which covers about 3.5 miles of tunnels. You can visit it, not very often. It's one of those museums that isn't open every day. It's called Drakelow Tunnels. April 1941, the Ministry of Aircraft Production announced its intention to build a massive underground factory just outside Wolverley, near Kinver Edge. if you know that part of the world. And it's because of the sandstone. It's easy to tunnel in. And until relatively recently, I think in my lifetime, people were still living in caves carved out of the sandstone cliffs in Kimber. They had outwardly bricks on the front, but behind, the dwellings were carved out of the sandstone. So if you wanted a new room, you could just dig one, I presume, although don't quote me on that. So there you go, a Kidderminster dimension to possible nuclear war. Except it's not nuclear war that we're talking about today. It's the possibility of some sort of invasion. It's the paucity of our missile capability, and it's the conclusion of a year-long inquiry that Britain is not ready to defend invasion. And that's the word on the front page of the Daily Telegraph today. Martin is in Bridlington, hopefully on a better line. Martin, what were you saying?
I served in the Territorial Army first back in the 80s, and then I joined the Royal Navy for 22 years. So a bit like your first caller, I've seen it from the Cold War up to I left the Navy in 2008. So, I mean, my first role in the Territorial Army, we were a quick reaction force to grab our webbing that was designed in 1958. Our SLR didn't get issued with waterproofs, only just started to get high leg boots after the Falklands War, and then to immediately just be flown over or sent on a North Sea ferry across to Europe and replaced the thousands of men that had been killed by the stampeding hordes of the Russians.
That was still the narrative, or that was the Cold War narrative, is that we could be at war with Russia by tea time.
Yeah, so that was it. So that's what we used to practice. But and then I did a few battle camps, living in trenches, eating and doing your toilet in the field. And I thought, there's got to be something better than this. So I joined the Navy, and I went to diesel electric submarines, and they were basically sort of one generation further on than the Second World War. They were very agricultural, big switches, breakers. Everything was hand operated. You could send everybody forward to go deep in emergency. We used to practice that once or twice a year. It was proper, I'm going to call it a boys' own adventure, but that's the wrong thing. But it was, as a young man, to be doing all this, because I was brought up surrounded by relatives who'd served in the First World War. Some in the First World War and the Second World War.
So what you're describing, I mean, it was already a bit anachronistic then, the self-image of the armed forces. It was already a little bit out of date, even then.
Absolutely, yeah. As soon as the Cold War came down, they suddenly said, well, why are we still pushing these, what we used to call as diesel dinosaurs around? So we had no choice but to go nuclear. Now, we'd had the nuclear deterrent since 1969 in the Resolution class, and I ended up going to the Vanguard class submarines. So I've completed 7 deterrent patrols with Armageddon, either at my feet or at my head, depending which bunk I was in.
Wow. And listen, I feel a bit embarrassed asking you this question because of what you've just described. But for people who say, how is it a deterrent? What do you say? And I know that in a way you don't need to really worry about the philosophy of it all because you're too busy with dealing with the reality of it all. But there is something. There's a tension to the idea that the only reason why Russia doesn't send nuclear bombs our way is because we've got a few we could send back their way.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, obviously, you read about it when you're young, and then the older you get, the wiser you get, the more you read. But, I mean, mutual assured destruction is just the best term ever. I remember hearing somebody, I forget, who said, the best definition of nuclear weapons is 2 men waist deep in petrol, one with 2 matches and one with 3. It doesn't matter who lights it. That's it, isn't it? So if you thought about it too much, you would probably go a little bit mad, but we were there to provide the deterrent. So, if the balloon went up, because every penny then spent would be wasted. If we're retaliating back against somebody, that means, does the UK even exist? So
do you think we have a deterrent now?
Oh, yes. It's the same deterrent now.
You sounded a bit like the Churchill dog then, Martin. Says, oh, yes.
Yeah, but it's right, because it's been there since 1969. It's called the Continuous At-Sea Deterrent.
But that would just be the submarines that you served on. What's your answer to the question of what the whole armed forces are for?
It's deterrent. Why do you need a raincoat on a sunny day? Well, it's not raining, is it? But it might rain. So why do we need an armed forces? We need an armed forces. Yes, the money would be better spent on the NHS or on schools or potholes.
Not if it starts raining.
But not if it's absolutely. So we do need something. Yes, you don't need the massive armed forces that we used to have up until the 80s and the 90s, you know, with literally hundreds of thousands
again, you could
troops.
answer until we do. I mean, that's the real question underpinning a lot of this conversation this hour, isn't it? The idea of maybe it is actually raining. Maybe it's already started raining and we're just not noticing. Because I don't know why, but we just don't think it's rain, or we think it's something else. We don't appreciate the efforts that Putin and his acolytes are already putting into... you get a rough idea about what Vladimir Putin wants for this country, what he would consider to be in his best interests and against our patriotic interests. You get the best idea of that by looking at the kind of politicians in this country who big up Vladimir Putin. And no prizes for guessing who's at the top of that particular Christmas tree. Martin, thank you. Bernard is in Belfast. Bernard, what would you like to say?
Well, I would agree with the previous poster, but I would also point out that it's very important that we respect post-war agreements with regard to the Iron Curtain. And that has not gone away. And Putin has clearly reintroduced the Iron Curtain and wishes to push it forward.
There weren't really any historical agreements. I mean, Gorbachev was absolutely adamant that the narrative of betrayal of the sort of NATO-Warsaw Pact standoff is completely bogus.
Was it really?
Yeah, I've got the clip of Gorbachev in front of me. I don't know whether he's talking Russian or English, though, so I'm not sure whether I can play it at the moment.
I'm quite sure Gorbachev said that.
Yes.
But in Putin's position, is that a reality?
I don't care. If Sweden wants to join NATO, it absolutely can. That's a matter of sovereignty and democracy. Isn't it?
I agree. But
and in fact, the fact that they want to suggests we should probably be a little bit more wary about the growing threat, the massing threat.
I agree. You asked us what role should the army hold, and I agree with you. I feel that we need to back our neighbours that are adjacent to Russia.
And does it? And do you think we do? Do you think we have the heft to?
I think we have the know-how.
Yeah.
I think we have the capabilities, and I think we ought to. I think, it may not be politically obvious, it may not be apparent, but I think, I do believe that there's a concern amongst European countries conventionally that Russia will always pose a threat on that eastern front.
Yeah, well, and the threat is greater than it's been at any point since the Cold War, which I think they would queue up to tell you from the Chancellor in Germany through to Donald Tusk in Poland, and countries like Estonia and Latvia are absolutely clear on that. We're a little bit detached, even without Brexit. We've always managed to sort of plough a slightly different furrow, probably as a consequence of the English Channel and the physical detachment from mainland Europe, from continental Europe. And then, of course, Brexit came along and delivered Vladimir Putin's wildest dreams by detaching us economically and politically from continental Europe, as well as geographically. General Lord Dannatt, former head of the army, has described this report today as sobering, a sobering wake-up call. And I think we should heed his warning. We have piled risk on risk over the years, taken too many peace dividends since the end of the Cold War, and we now stand in grave danger from Putin's Russia. The time to act is now. We are in the last chance saloon. And I'll tell you what's weird today is reflecting on how that risk, how that threat from Russia lands in your life. I think I have an above-average grasp of Russian disinformation and indeed of Russian interference in Western democratic exercises, whether you're talking about Brexit referendums or American presidential elections. It's a very, very, very easy case to make, even to prove. What you can't do is measure it. What you can't do is put numbers and weights and metrics on how much success that influence enjoyed. All you can really do is look at whether the outcome would have delighted the Kremlin. And if the answer is yes, then they have probably worked very hard to bring that outcome about. Even that doesn't prove that they tipped the scales. But even as someone with an above-average grasp of all of that, I still have a psychological block when it comes to feeling the scale of the military threat. Isn't that strange?
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 3 minutes after 11. I've got a double bubble missed information for you coming up after PMQs in the final hour, the next hour indeed of the programme, addressing one of the hardiest of perennials. Listen, if I say it's nearly December, or it's the middle of November, Therefore, one of the finest traditions of British media, of British journalism, is about to be enacted, or has already been enacted. What would you think of? Knowing what you know about this programme, knowing what you know about the rest of the British media, and knowing what you know about the calendar as Christmas approaches, what will British journalism be dedicating itself to very, very soon, if not already? You're absolutely right. Someone's cancelling Christmas. Claim idiots. And we'll be having a look at those idiots and those claims in the next hour of the programme. We're also, and I don't know that this counts as Idiot's Corner, because the truth is halfway around the world. A lie is halfway around the world, isn't it, before the truth has got its trousers on. But if you have been inhaling headlines about record numbers of people fleeing the country, including various callers to the breakfast show who can't wait to live in a country that's got Sharia law, which is a bit of a turnabout, isn't it? But there we are. It would appear that the facts, as we touched upon but didn't fully explain yesterday, are rather different than the headlines, but not necessarily because the people writing the headlines are trying to mislead or defraud you. Same with Brexit, really. I know it doesn't necessarily please everybody, but I don't think that a lot of people who thought that they were in favour of Brexit realised how stupid their position was. They weren't lying. They weren't pretending to support it. They just didn't understand what they were supporting. And the reporting of our migration figures, which I told you yesterday, everyone who's constantly wanging on about the necessity to bring immigration down will not today be celebrating the fact that immigration has come down. Instead, they are massaging the figures to pretend that it's proof of people fleeing the country as a consequence of Labour policies that haven't really been enacted yet. On we go. What's the opposite of patriotism, I wonder? I don't know, but we're seeing a lot of it at the moment, aren't we? And this is a national or country-related conversation as well that we're about to have next, heading off in an entirely different direction. If I told you that the government wanted to introduce something to our lives that had already been linked to an increased risk of 32 different diseases, If I told you that the government wanted to introduce something that was linked, scientifically and evidentially linked, to harm in every major organ that we have, what would you say? You'd probably think I'd gone bonkers, or that I'd signed up to a tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy theory website. The government wants to do what? It wants to introduce something to our lives, to our bodies, to our children's bodies, that has been linked to 32 different diseases, including diabetes, cancer, heart disease and depression, and which has been shown or linked to harm in every major organ. The world's largest review of ultra-processed food has arrived at these conclusions, and it is one of those subjects, isn't it, that has changed over the years that we've spent together. You kind of sometimes feel that you've got something in your hands. You've got to grips with something, metaphorically speaking, and then it changes. I think my early interest in ultra-processed foods was because of all the mountebanks and charlatans who would constantly wang on about the nanny state without telling you that they're secretly funded, or without telling you that the lobby groups they worked for, while pretending that they were think tanks, were secretly funded by organisations that made enormous amount of money from encouraging us to do things that caused us great harm. It's extraordinary how successful that takeover of public discourse has been. You can barely turn on the television or the radio without hearing some Herbert from a secretly funded lobby group masquerading as a think tank, claiming that the government is interfering in our lives in unacceptable ways. Really, what's it trying to do? What's this terrible government doing in such a totalitarian fashion? Well, it's arguing that we shouldn't be consuming the stuff that increases the risk of 32 different diseases. What? And that's a bad thing, is it? Lads, down on Tufton Street, you want us to do more gambling, more ultra-processed foods, more tobacco, more alcohol, more... Who's paying your wages? I can't tell you that. Why not? Oh, hang on, let me check the memo. Because we are worried that our donors would come in for public criticism. Oh, okay, yeah. That's what's technically known as a massive lie. But again, that goes unchecked by the kind of clowns that book these people for their programmes on a weekly, daily, monthly, annual basis. Who pays your wages? You can't answer that question, you're not coming on the programme. Full stop. End of conversation. sadly, we are close to unique in that context on this show, and I don't understand why, even after it's been pointed out that if people won't tell you who pays their wages, you shouldn't trust their quotes, research, end quotes, because it's quite possibly been sponsored by precisely the people who have ended up hearing exactly what they want to hear in the research that they have paid for. Could be a coincidence, and if you believe that, there is a bridge that I want to sell you. I've got two questions, and what I mean by having come to grips with it or got a grasp on the issue is that I don't think anything's changed. We talk about it a lot, not just on this programme, but ultra-processed food is a big thing now in conversation. Do you know one of the things I hate the most about food? Conversations. Not about food. I don't hate much about food, although I'm not fond of marzipan. One of the things I hate the most about food-based conversations is class, is the class dimension. It's another thing that the liars on Tufton Street do. They pretend that attempts to, for example, put taxes on fizzy drinks to discourage people from consuming things that are linked to 32 different diseases. They pretend that it's an attack upon poorer people or that it's an attack on working classes. It's not. It's the polar opposite. You don't think that the people paying these lobby groups are feeding their own children this filth, this muck, on anything like the scale that other people are for a moment. But I can't see any improvement at all. We're still, I think, the second only to the United States, according to the research that I've seen this morning, when it comes to how much of this stuff we consume. The impact upon our health is cataclysmic. It's described by this latest report, which you can read in The Lancet this week, as fueling an illness pandemic. 43 scientists and researchers arguing that ultra-processed foods are displacing fresh foods and meals as food firms put profit above all else. And a pandemic of chronic disease such as cancer and diabetes has followed. I think of tobacco and fossil fuels. And I wonder whether you're ready to see ultra-processed foods in the same space. And it feels wrong, right, to put them in the same space. But politically, they're almost identical. Politically, the effort put into encouraging us to consume more and more and more of something that will kill us or hurt us or harm us is identical with ultra-processed foods as it is to tobacco and fossil fuels historically. And the huge effort, political and financial, put into resisting attempts to cut consumption is identical as well. You know, you look at the organisations set up to resist climate change science and you see an almost mirror image of the organisations dedicated to resisting ultra-processed food science. It is identical. I mean, I sometimes wonder why this needs to be explained, and then I remember the amount of money and energy that's been expended on persuading people to do things that are bad for them dwarfs the amount of money and energy expended on persuading people to do things that are good for them. One really helpful illustration is the amount of effort that's put into advertising tap water as a refreshing libation, as opposed to the amount of money that's put into advertising drinks made out of corn syrup or drinks that are measurably and obviously bad for you. If you are a harried parent of any class and you have not educated yourself or you haven't been reached with the educational thrust on this issue, simple advertising will persuade you that these things can't possibly be as bad for you or your child as the advertising tells you they are. And I remain puzzled by two elements of this conversation. Well, I'm puzzled by one element and I want to inspire you with another. Okay? So, question number one is, why are we among the worst in the world at this? What is it about the United Kingdom that explains why we are among the worst in the world when it comes to consuming ultra-processed foods? And, anything that's not fresh, really. It may contain artificial flavours, emulsifiers, colourings. Most obviously, you're looking at soft drinks and packaged snacks. extremely palatable, very high in calories, very low in nutrients. Unprocessed or minimally processed foods like whole fruits and vegetables are the other end of the scale. And the amount of this stuff that we eat is frankly extraordinary. Listen to what Professor Chris Van Tullochen from University College London and an author of a best-selling book on this very, very subject. Graham and others have wondered how long it would take me to mention that it kept me off the #1 spot in the Sunday Times bestseller list. So I have a conflicted relationship with this book. Damn you, Van Tullochen. But anyway, #2 is good as well. Just ask Wham. But he describes it like this. There's been a 3-decade history of reformulation by the food industry. We took the fat out first, then we took the sugar out. We replaced the sugar with the sweeteners, the fats with gums. These products have been extensively reformulated, and we have seen obesity, particularly obesity in childhood and other rates of diet-related disease, persistently go up in line with reformulation. That sounds like Frankenstein's laboratory, doesn't it? Dr. Frankenstein's laboratory. It does not sound like a greengrocer's. Even the language of reformulation, gums and sweeteners, sounds like something from a laboratory rather than something from a field, because it is something from a laboratory rather than something from a field. It just is. This is not a product-level discussion, he adds. The entire diet is being ultra-processed. And remember that built into the definition of ultra-processed food is its purpose. Its purpose is for profit. Okay, 3 questions then. Why is the UK so addicted, so much more addicted to ultra-processed food than other countries? Okay? 0345 6060 973. Question #2. How easy is it to get off it? I'm doing really well. I haven't made a particular effort. I've just started cooking a lot. I've really started cooking a lot in the last 5 years. Since we started talking about this, I cook every night at home. Regardless of who's in the house. If I'm in on my own, I'll even cook for myself. You don't remove entirely ultra-processed foods from your diet. That would be absolutely impossible to do. But I've got an app called Yuka, YUKA, where you can scan the barcode on everything you buy and it will give you a rating on how ultra-processed it is. And I find that incredibly helpful. Sometimes I'm really taken by surprise. Some of the surprises are delightful. Some of the things that you think must be ultra-processed because they're in the same aisle as other ultra-processed things turn out not to be ultra-processed. But I recognise that many people, once you know the truth, I don't think it's that hard to massively reduce the amount of ultra-processed foods that you eat. Well, once you have accepted the science. But that's why I'm talking about nicotine and fossil fuels, because we have seen with both of those how easy it is either to ignore the science or latterly to dishonestly refute it. But when it comes to ultra-processed food, I don't know why it's so hard for people to see what is in front of them. And that's question 3. Why? I mean, it's partly linked to question 1, isn't it? The idea of why this country has such a terrible relationship with such terrible foods. Why the UK? Regular listeners to the programme have little, mental signposts now. I bet you do. Because how many people are thinking about French school dinners at this point? Because of that reaction that we all had when someone sent us the French school dinner menu from their child's school in France, and it was just utterly unrecognisable to the average British parent. The combination of fresh and therefore healthy food served up in a way that sort of would have turkey twizzlers turning in their grave. So why the UK? Why do we have historically, politically, economically, currently such an appalling relationship with ultra-processed food? In terms of what was it like, lived experience, inspiring other people, how hard or easy is it to give up? Once you know the science, once you've read the books, just tell me about the changes you made, okay? and the impact that had. Because what you won't be able to do really is say for certain that it has removed the risk of diabetes, reduced the risk of cancer, improved your heart health, because most of us aren't measuring these things. But you can talk to me about mental health and depression. I came off ultra-processed food, and listen, correlation is not causation, but I'm pretty certain the only major change I made in my life was to massively reduce the amount of ultra-processed food I was eating. Physically, the most obvious change was losing weight. Mentally, the most obvious change was feeling happier. And who here doesn't want to feel happier? And then you've got the third question, which is why it is like fossil fuels and climate change. Why is it so hard to persuade people that they are hurting themselves when it is simultaneously so obvious? There's quite a lot there to dig into. You come at it from whichever angle you want. You can answer one question, two questions, all three questions, or no questions, because you think I've missed a really important element of the conversation and you're very keen to air it. But that's your starting point. Why us? Why the UK? Why do we have such an atrocious 57% of our adult diet? That puts us in second place, 1 point behind the United States. In third place, you'd have to go to Canada, but they're 10 points behind us. So we really are almost alongside America in a class of our own when it comes to consuming ultra-processed foods. I would like you to tell me why you think that is, okay? And then I'd like you to tell me what changes you have made and what impact those changes had. And then we'll have a little look at the idea of why we're so resistant to the science. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. It is 11:19.
James O'Brien on LBC.
21 minutes after 11 is the time. And there's one bit missing from this. Sorry, my bad. How could we do it? What would you do? How would you stop? Someone listening to this programme right now, dealing with the reality of the advertising industry that we have in this country and that as a commercial broadcaster we rely upon, but how would you persuade somebody to change their ways? What would you say? What would be the little kicker, the magic bullet, or the catchphrase? You know, like the Green Cross Code that taught generations of children how to cross the road without getting hit by a vehicle. Well, is there anything we could do for each other just to bring to the table and say, if you do this, you will find it a lot easier? Reading labels is possibly on that list, but that can be a bit of a faff, which is why I love this app. A lot of you are asking me about it. They should have me on a retainer. Yucca, it's called, Y-U-K-A. As with a lot of apps, there are tiers. I think there's a paid option and there's a free option, but the free option is pretty comprehensive. But they don't have advertising. It's not in any way linked to brands. What's really interesting about it, and probably really relevant, I'll shut up, I promise, in a minute, but just let me get this out. Really relevant to this conversation more broadly, is that it will give you different ratings for products you think are the same. So, you know, like, I mean, oddly, lip balm. I know nobody eats lip balm, or at least you're not supposed to, but you can have two lip balms, one of which has a very high rating for ultra-processed ingredients and one of which has a very low rating. So one of which is, quotes, good for you, and one of which is bad for you. But the same with tortilla chips, would you believe? Some of the snacks in the crisp aisle will have a high rating for healthiness. They will be good when it comes to ultra-processed ingredients, and they'll be in the same aisle as the stuff that's really, really bad. I'm going to check my own history on that in a minute, because I don't want to misremember anything and give you bad advice, but it's probably my favourite app, actually. 23 after 11 is the time. Dom is in Ashvale to kick things off. Dom, what do you want to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for having me on. First-time caller, and I'm so glad that this is the conversation I've called into.
Good man.
I went on an ultra-processed free journey about 2 years ago when my daughter was born.
Yeah.
The reason we did it was because she has a dairy allergy, or like a milk intolerance.
Yes.
So we had to start finding things that she could have instead of milk, instead of cheese. And actually, when we started looking on the back of these packages, it is sickening how many ingredients, how many different chemicals essentially are in all of these ingredients. And to begin with, it was just her. We were just doing it for her, and we were just eating normally. We were doing the standard thing like calorie counting, eating what we think is good for us, but, the getting on the scale and not losing any weight. Eventually, it obviously made sense for us to all go, when I say all, me, my partner and my little girl, to go on this ultra-processed free diet. And in that time, I've lost 20 kilograms of weight. I also have Crohn's disease, and I have had that for 15 years since I was a teenager.
I'm glad you clarified that, because the way you said it sounded like it was a consequence of changing the diet, whereas you're about to tell us the symptoms have actually got better as a consequence of changing your diet.
Absolutely. For 15 years, James, I've been on medication, and that was, supposedly to help my Crohn's disease. And I've been doing your normal dieting, like people, you see these packaging, and it's high this and it's high that, and it's good for you, but actually it's dreadful for you. In the last 2 years, I've not been on any medication. I've been on an ultra-processed free diet, and my symptoms have completely cleared. Now, I'm not saying I've cured Crohn's disease, because I don't think that is the possibility, or it is the case. However, my symptoms have got so much better since being on the ultra-processed free diet. I think the problem in this country is that it's so convenient for people to just... It's not made easy for people to do this, because you go into Tesco's, you go into wherever you go, and you pick up a sandwich, but this sandwich has got so much stuff in it. You can't just easily go on an ultra-processed free diet. You have to sort of change your routine and change your life a little bit. The other thing
you have to cook, you have to prepare your own food a lot more, don't you?
Yeah,
as well, which can be time consuming, and ultra processed food is cheap as well.
Yes, that was my next point. Changing to an ultra processed free diet is not easy, because it's so expensive. Buying good food for you, fresh fruit and vegetables, all that sort of stuff is expensive. However, I do honestly think if people change their routine ever so slightly to, factor in the fact they have to pre-make their lunch, pre-make their dinners, whatever it might be, and start incorporating ultra-processed free foods, it will change your life. And do you know the annoying thing about it is I have these conversations with my friends and colleagues, and people look at me like I'm strange.
Why do you think that is? I mean, apart from your physical appearance, why do you think that?
It's the red hair that does it. I think the ginger, they don't like it. But do you know, I think it's just the norm, isn't it?
Yeah.
When people start talking about things that aren't normal, even though once you make the change, you will be on my side. I promise you. You've got
the zeal of a convert, haven't you? You sound like an evangelist, and that is where I sort of come from as well. That idea that I can't quite believe that people don't believe you, if you see what I mean. They can see that you're healthier. They know that you are. It's visible, and I bet you're happier as well. I mean, I bet you're a more cheerful person as a consequence as well. And
the change is just nothing like I ever expected. And hats off to my partner who actually got me into it, because without her, and I wish I could show the people that are listening to you the life I lived before. Fizzy drinks, chocolate, I've been overweight for years, James. Like I said, Crohn's disease. It's completely changed, and actually, eventually, now that we've changed some things, we eat organic dark chocolate, stuff like that. When I try dairy milk, whatever it is, I don't like it. I don't actually enjoy it, which then makes the whole thing a lot easier, because I'm not bothered about having a sweet treat and all this rubbish, because I don't enjoy the taste anymore. I like the stuff that I like. My palate has completely changed. And it honestly has changed me for I
can hear it in your voice. Everyone can. That's why I love radio.
It's massive.
No,
it's absolutely huge.
And you've done. I didn't think anyone would actually be able to answer all three questions, but you've made a very good fist of it. The changes it's made to you, perhaps not as much as we could on the reasons why this country has a bigger problem with it than other countries. I'm trying to think of things that would be unique to us, because if you talk, for example, about rationing, which is often a popular answer to the question. I mean, you remember when growing up and shop bought was seen as preferable. Shop bought was a treat. A shop bought cake. A Mr. Kipling fondant. Oh man, this probably isn't a very good thing to do in a phone-in about the perils of ultra-processed food. But do you remember? But that wouldn't apply in the United States of America. That wouldn't be the kind of response to rationing. And also, I know it was generations ago, but it would still have filtered through what your grandparents fed your parents, what your parents fed you, what you feed your children. So it can't just be that, because the United States and Australia are very, very high. The three countries in the world where Rupert Murdoch has the greatest stranglehold on the UK public. I think that's a coincidence, but not necessarily. It's coming up to 11:30. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. More on this in a moment. PMQs, of course, on the way at 12 o'clock. Natasha will be joining me shortly before then to have our customary crack at predicting what is likely to come up. And then you'll be delighted to hear Simon Marks with us at 12:30. Yet more madness in the Oval Office. But again, the line between silly and sinister being hopped over with gay abandon by the President of the United States of America and a world leader believed by American intelligence to have ordered the murder of a journalist just a few years ago. And then I've got a double bubble missed information for you. Right-wing media claiming that Christmas has been cancelled again. Guess what? Not true. And right-wing media claiming that people are fleeing the country in their droves as a consequence of Labour policies. Guess what? Not true. More on that later in the show. But now, Dominic Ellis has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 33 minutes after 11. I mean, it is just fascinating. Think about long journeys. I think one of the great breakthrough calls on this subject was from a lorry driver, wasn't it, who just compared the experience in France, or most of continental Europe, actually, with the experience in the UK. I've had many of my breakthrough moments with regards to ultra-processed food when on long car journeys. The queue in the service station. One of them does salads. One of the service stations, but one of the franchises that often pops up in service stations does salads. But even there, you know, if you help yourself to the generic dressing or something like that, you can be piling unhealthy stuff on top of healthy stuff. But I just think of the queues. And you know that little bit, if you're ordering online, not online, if you're ordering on a screen in a fast food joint and it tries to tell you more. So you've ordered a meal and it says, do you want some extra nuggets with that? Or do you want to stick an extra burger on the side? Or do you remember supersize it? But all of these things happen in other countries. Why is the impact so profound in the United Kingdom? I honestly don't know. And listen, I'm not a communist. I'm not a food, despite what Johnny Vaughan said last night. I'm not a food Marxist. I recognise that everything in moderation. This isn't a scorched earth suggestion that we should criminalise sweets or ban crisps. But if you're putting roughly half of your diet is measurably, scientifically and demonstrably bad for you, we've got a major flipping problem. A major problem. Matt's in Thatcham. Matt, what would you like to say?
Hey, James, how you doing today?
Good, Matt. What's on your mind?
Excellent. Well, I think your last caller pretty much said everything I wanted to say. He sounds in a very similar position. So as of January this year, I had a routine appointment where I needed to check my blood pressure, and I'd been on a mountain bike holiday. I'm always keeping myself fit.
Right.
I'd been walking up mountains with, 10, 15 kilos of tools, water and everything one day, and then I'd be flying down it on my bike the next, ready to do it all again.
Wow.
So I thought...
That sounds fun.
Fine. No, it's really good. Really enjoy it. So I thought, yeah, I'm in a good place. That'll be fine. That's not what the blood pressure told me.
Oh, gosh.
It was really high. It was like about 180 over 110, I think.
Yeah, that is high.
Unknown to me, so I sort of said, well, do you think I should go straight across the road to the A&E? And the answer was, I think you probably should. So I spent a very long time in the A&E just waiting, because obviously it was really busy. They checked a few things and then said, you've got a problem with your bloods.
Right.
So I ended up being given a bed in the acute cardiac unit at about 2:30 in the morning. I woke up, I sort of looked around, I had a stretch. Everyone in there was a lot older than me.
Right.
And I thought, what am I doing here?
It's a big wake-up call, that, isn't it?
It was a very big wake-up call. So actually the timings really worked out well, because I had been going, still go to the gym. And they were offering a 3-week cleanse. And I thought, you know what? Any time in my life, I need to do this now, and it's been such a game changer for me.
What did the doctor say to you? Well, I mean, what was the kind of prognosis? The reason why your blood pressure is so high, it could be ...
There are many elements,
of course,
as there always are in life. One of them potentially diet. I think salt could have been the problem.
Okay,
stress as well. We all have to deal with stress, unfortunately. It's life, isn't it?
And they feed on each other, of course. Sometimes when we're stressed, we reach for the thing that makes us feel briefly better, which is often not very good for us.
Absolutely, and I've done it my entire life.
So you knocked it on the head almost overnight?
Yeah, so what I learned from this 3 weeks was they cut out virtually everything. So I could only really drink water, I couldn't have any caffeine, so I was drinking caffeinated tea with no milk. Right. Only for 3 weeks, and it was just eating, white meats, no red meats. You could eat fish, you could eat vegetables, no carbs, no bread, no pasta.
And what happened?
And I went with it, and it was hard, but... Yeah. I noticed the difference. I could see it physically.
How quickly?
I'd lost within 2 weeks.
Wow.
Within 2 weeks, I could see that I'd lost my beer belly, and it was going. And I could see I was losing kind of fat everywhere. And that was just for one simple change. I mean, it's difficult because I am, like you just said about your lorry driver, I'm on the road and have been for well over 30 years.
Right.
So when you're there, you can see those big... golden arches, from the motorway, pulling you in to go, no, just go and eat that.
Absolutely.
I'm sat here pulled over looking in a service station. All I can see is sugar,
ultra-processed food,
fat.
donuts, pasties, pies, cakes, crisps.
And I've done that for years. So,
but you pushed through. And what about the way you feel as opposed to the way you look? Did you notice any differences there?
Absolutely. I feel a lot better. Okay, sometimes I still struggle to sleep, but that's a different element to what we're talking about. I feel better. My memory has actually improved as well.
Yeah, I believe you.
Which I wouldn't have expected.
No, I believe you. And finally, of course, we need to ask the blood pressure.
The blood pressure. So they put me on a low dose of Rampuril.
Right.
And the heart man checked my heart and said, look, this is short term. If it's long term, you'd have an enlarged heart, which you don't have.
So it was lifestyle, but it was, you caught it in the nick of time.
Absolutely that, James. So, now I do prepare my mackerel salad, and I love it. I never knew I could love salads before.
What's in your mackerel? Is that smoked mackerel or just normal mackerel?
It's smoked mackerel. Smoked mackerel does have a higher salt content, but...
but not if you're... not. Well, I mean, it does, but you're leavening that with a lot of salad.
Absolutely.
Products. Because you're not allowed... this isn't a ban on tasty stuff. It's just a balance, isn't it?
No. And don't get me wrong, James. I still... I'm not a saint. I will allow myself to eat something and have a couple of drinks at the weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's important to remember that, because no one wants to live like a kind of medieval monk. Well, no, I don't know why I say medieval monks lived really, really well. They were eating swans all the time. But nobody wants to live like a kind of, a sort of an ascetic. And that's the point. That's two calls who both, you can just hear it. Why would you not want to improve these areas of your life? Answer, because of the siren voices in your ears telling you to eat that or drink that. And you're never going to cut it out entirely. No one's suggesting that you should. But if 50% of your diet is linked to 32 diseases, then you are on a hiding to nothing. Get it down to 30%, get it down to 20%, get it down to 10%. No one's saying get it down to 0%. And you will feel the difference within days, as Matt attests. More on the history would be good. Why do we think that the UK is particularly awful at this? And is it a coincidence that some of the worst performing countries are the USA, Australia and the UK? I had a feeling South Korea was really bad as well, actually. Probably something to do with advertising. But is there anything we can separate from the pack and apply uniquely to the United Kingdom? Is there anything we could point at and say that's why? Another thing, because no one wants to sound sententious or aloof. I happen to live really near supermarkets. But where I am now, I can be in Lidl or Morrison's in less than 5 minutes. So I shop for that night now. I get off the bus outside the supermarket, I pop in the supermarket and I buy what I need that night. It means you throw away a lot less food, but it also means that you buy fresh. You don't, and I'd much rather make a bolognese sauce than buy a ready-made lasagna or something like that. That's just pleasure, but I've got a lot of time in this cycle of my life. But living really near a shop is probably quite a big deal as well, and not something that everybody can do. Getting started, if you do a big shop, you want it to last for as long as possible, and that will involve buying stuff that's packed with preservatives because it lasts longer. Do you remember the tale of Bangkok Airport? Do you remember the moment I had at Bangkok Airport that really changed the way I look at these things? And it was such a strange one, and something similar has happened to you. And because you weren't off your belly on extremely powerful painkillers because your tooth was because you had an ear infection as a consequence of swimming for 2 weeks in swimming pool, in the hotel swimming pool, then it may not have hit you with quite the sort of surreal impact that it hit me. But I just noticed the prices on the ice creams at Dairy Queen and the increments, so that buying a barrel of ice cream was only a little bit more expensive than buying a tiny cup. So the quantities went up in huge amounts, but the prices didn't go up by that much at all, because all of the energy was put upon squeezing a few more baht out of you, squeezing a few more dollars, squeezing a few more pounds out of you, by making it look like the only really good value one was the 2-litre tub that you'd then sit in the departure lounge shoving into your gob. But in fact, it's because what they were producing was so cheap. And what they were really doing was pursuing profit, nothing else. You become the commodity. And little things like that just show you what you're up against. Terry's in Southend. Terry, what would you like to say?
First off, I'm sorry that if I sound nervous.
Sorry, you don't sound nervous at all. I don't know what you sound like the rest of the time, Terry. You sound great to me.
But I do think that you hit the nail on the head. You said that you've got a lot of time.
Yes.
You're quite fortunate with your job, I think.
Well, I'm never off duty, Terry. Let us not forget that. I'm constantly on the lookout for fascinating areas of conversation and keeping up to date with developments as if my life depended on it. But yes, I do have a little bit more time to spend cooking than the average bear.
I mean, so me and my wife, we've both got an allotment together. We love to eat fresh food when we can. Our problem is lunches, so preparing food for lunch. So today I've got a smoked ham cheddar cheese sandwich from Tesco's with paprika crisps and iron brew. 1,100 calories just that one meal. In the sandwich, you're looking at 69 ingredients. So it's
how many?
Processed. 69 ingredients. I counted them.
69?
Yeah.
In a ham and cheese sandwich?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, number one, gold star for Terry, top of the class for doing that level of research. Number two, blooming heck.
It's stupid. I think the problem with England and probably America is time. At work, I used to deliver to West London carpet shops. Most of them were Muslim, and they would stop for about 2 hours every day and cook a proper curry out the back on a gas stove.
Yeah.
You go over to Europe, so I've spent a lot of time in Malta, and they do the same. So for lunch, they'll take an hour and a half, 2 hours, and cook a fresh meal. Not many people in England tend to have that privilege.
Why is that, do you think?
Well, I now work in retail, so basically it's grab a sandwich while you're serving customers.
Yeah. So it's the work ethic or the work life, the work balance. See, I see it here with almost all of my colleagues will eat at their desk just as I'm leaving, actually, which again is a part of my luck. But and I'm not ever going to tell them not to, because that would be weird. But the just simple sitting together and eating freshly prepared food, which is available here, and a lot of them will go upstairs and get it, but they'll eat at their desk, which means something is worse than if they were eating in a more communal and a more normal fashion.
Definitely. I mean, and by the time we get home from work, so we want to have a shower. When we get home from work, we want to eat. But by the time we get home from work, it's just quick to put something in the oven while you grab a shower. So
yeah,
won't get
I mean,
home
bulk
from work
cooking.
7, 8 o'clock.
Yeah, a lot of people bulk cook, don't they? So you could have, if you know, but that lunch there, it's quite. I mean, what else could you have? Let's just think, because I'm late for the break, so we won't spend too long on it. But you know, we've got 69 ingredients in a ham and cheese sandwich. What could you have ordered? What could you have bought in that shop instead? So you could have got an apple instead of the paprika crisps, or you could have got, what's the thing I buy? I don't know if they're available in your shop, but there's it was
Tesco's. But,
okay. Well, they might have the sort of spicy chickpeas.
Yes, definitely.
They come up much better. And what would you get instead of the sandwich? A wrap of some sort? I don't know, but it's not going to make your juices flow, is it? It's not going to get your taste buds tingling in the way of what you've bought has done. At least not to start with. I don't know. I don't know what happens next. Did we lose Terry then? I was about to make him a new lunch. It is 11:46. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, and that, of course, brings us back to the full-time drivers. Because even if you're making your own sandwiches, there's no earthly way they're going to end up with 69 ingredients in them. Do you see what I mean? A bit of cheese, bit of tomato. Don't really need the ham. And then bread. And bread is one of the things that will amaze you. So bread, you'd think, water, yeast, flour. 69 ingredients in a ham and cheese sandwich. So I go to one shop near me, the sort of Middle Eastern grocers, and the pita bread in there, ingredients, water, yeast, flour. It means it will go mouldy quicker if you don't freeze it, okay? Or you eat it before it goes mouldy. Water, yeast, flour. Go into the supermarket, pita bread, same name, same looking packet, but same product really in front of you, and it's more like the sandwich with 69 ingredients. It's not got 69 ingredients in it, but it's got more than 3. Water, yeast, flour, good. Water, yeast, flour, preservatives, additives, colourings, whatever it is, bad. Simples, or not. And the question of why, I think that's probably it. Why we have such a weird relationship with both work and food. Working to live as opposed to, or rather living to work as opposed to working to live.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:51. I mean, there is a lot you can do. I'm trying to find the thing that I buy at the railway station when I come home that way. And on bread, Jason's is very popular, but it's going to be more expensive than the own brand white slice. A Waitrose samosa comes in at excellent. So these are the things I've done, all right? And if you find it really boring, that's fine. But rather than getting a Greggs sausage roll, if you've got that snacky feeling, I now will hopefully walk past a Waitrose, and they're at the station quite often as well, and get their samosa. I haven't tested any other samosa, but a prawn mayonnaise sandwich is poor. That will come in at about 45 out of 100 on the app, whereas the samosa comes in at 78 out of 100. And then there's a cheese and ham sandwich as well, just like our last fellas, which comes in at 3 out of 100, and that's from Pret a Manger. Just little things that I find interesting, because food is one of the great universals. The Marks and Spencer's dried mango, which you might get from the snack aisle because you're feeling snacky, comes in as poor. It's got sulfites in it on the additives column. It comes in as poor. So Marks and Spencer's dried mango, you'd think, I'll get that instead of some sweets. But the thing that comes in as good, or actually it comes in as excellent, it gets 78 out of 100. It's in the Indian food aisle in my local Morrison's, and it is sweetened mango pulp made by a company called Kesar, Kesar. So sometimes I forget to do it. Sometimes I go mad for doing it, checking the barcodes to get the additive content and the ultra-processed food impact. So I buy a tin of that, which is nowhere near expensive, and I stick it in the ice cream maker. Now, I know not everybody has got an ice cream maker, but that makes a sorbet that is, actively healthy. But then you go for the dried mango bits that you see in the snack aisle, and they're actively not. It's just weird once you get into it. It can be strangely fascinating, strangely addictive, actually, to test everything. But we haven't really nailed the question of why we're so rubbish at it. Chris is in Glasgow. Chris, what have you got?
Pleasure to talk to you, James.
Cheers.
As a chef of 40 years, I basically look upon it as corporate consumerism is to blame.
Yeah.
As well as a general lack of laziness. Now, I mean, obviously, I cook from fresh where possible, but I mean, ultra fresh would be getting it from the farm, or getting it from the bakery, or getting it from the butcher. We don't have them anymore in Britain.
No, we again, you do if you're lucky, or if you've got a few quid, you can go. I've got a butcher's that I have a relationship with, so to speak, and that they'll tell me, I've got this in and I've got that in, and you might like this, and they'll remember what I bought last time and how did you get on with that. But that is rare, isn't it? Even if you go to
even just the likes of a proper fishmonger, where you can actually find what you would say good governance, where you could actually sort of like trace the lineage of the product back to its original source. A farm.
But that's been true here since the Second World War, probably, hasn't it?
Well, yeah, probably. I mean, I was telling your researcher there, that, I mean, since the age of 16, I've benefited from having a Mediterranean diet. You know, like garlic, fennel, you know, like things that, you know, your average Joe Soap in the street just wouldn't even know how to cook.
And yet, I used to spend a lot of time in Greece, and the family that I was with, the dad was, you know, he'd come to this country to visit, and he'd laugh in our supermarkets, even at the fresh food, because all the tomatoes looked the same. So we've got a weird relationship with food in this country. These sort of homogenous, identical tomatoes, which don't really... No person who grows their own is going to recognise the idea of all 6 of them in a packet being almost identical in dimensions and the same shade of red. You know, if it's got a bit of a scab on it, then you cut it off before you put it in your salad and stuff. We're a bit sanitised, we're a bit infantilised, aren't we? We're a bit nursery food in this country. And nursery food is kind of close to ultra-processed because it's high levels of preparation. I like that. The relationship with the land and the relationship with work would perhaps explain why we're world-beating when it comes to consuming ultra-processed foods. Chris, take care. Mark is in Southampton. Mark, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James. This really resonates with me. So I lived in France for quite a few years, and I've really adopted their lifestyle. And everyone is so knowledgeable about food there, about foraging. They're all out there at the weekends picking wild asparagus, you know, as a family thing. And I was very impressed with that. But I came back to England when we had children, decided to make a life here, and I slipped. So I must admit, I kind of forgot all that and slipped into the
it's so
UK
easy to do. It's called convenience food for a reason, isn't it?
Yeah, I was busy. But then 5 years ago, I got diagnosed with cancer, stage 4 cancer. That's okay, it's fine. They put me on immunotherapy, and I've been cancer-free for about 4 years. But it really gave me a chance to look at how I was eating, and as a family, we've all really changed how we eat completely. Grow a lot of our own vegetables and spend time. Now, I've got busy again now with my work, but it's just our habits, and I think that is a lot of the problem that I see around me. And people are just in this habit of just grabbing food, grabbing tasty food, not really thinking of it in a medicinal way, which is why I think the Europeans have got more of a handle on.
Yeah, and that's the point, isn't it? Is it, in a way, it's an unhelpful question or an unhelpful comparison, because we're talking about two destinations arrived at via completely different journeys. So what you're saying is that it's a habit you have to break. There's not much point looking at France for inspiration. You're just going to see a difference in France. But the journey we take,
it's part of their culture.
Yeah, so the journey we take to the same place is going to be very different from the French journey. We need to undo and reverse, recalibrate and rethink.
Totally, yeah.
And the effort put into dissuading us from doing that is I mean, there's the psychological side, and then there's the financial side, the money spent on making us make bad choices, and the psychology of the easy option. You know, I always think of the fixed odds betting terminals, Mark. And when I read into the science behind them, I was astonished by the level of engineering that goes into getting the calibrations just right to make us keep pumping money into them. Just enough comes out again, just enough winning. The margins are incredibly sophisticated, and the same is true of ultra-processed food in terms of what they put in it to make us crave more and more and more and more. But yeah, a health scare is going to be one of the things that rips the scales from your eyes, that's for sure. It is 11:58. Natasha has joined us. PMQs is on the horizon, and just a quick word on the apps the single app I've been recommending. There are others. It's not the answer to everything. They are good. They are a force for good, but obviously balanced diets involve rather more than just checking the barcode of everything you buy and making all your decisions based upon that. But for all the people that have asked, the one that I use is called Yuka, Y-U-K-A, and the first thing that you'll be shocked by is the convenience food, the petrol station sandwich or the supermarket sandwich. Even I'm shocked at the lad who just told us that his ham and cheese sandwich had 69 ingredients in it. If you read the ingredients of something and you don't know what the words mean, or you've never seen them in your fridge or in your cupboard, chances are it's not very good for you. You can have that for nothing. Natasha Clark is here to tell us exactly what's going to come up at PMQs today.
Yeah, on that, I was trying to find lemonade yesterday without, is it saccharin?
Is it? Saccharin.
Saccharin, that's
yes.
it. And but 90% of the ones I was looking at all had that, and plus another 10, 20 ingredients that I've got no idea of.
Water and lemon. Water, lemon and sugar.
I know, that's all you really should need for lemonade, but apparently no. But yes, final PMQs before the budget next week. So you would expect an economic focus this week, as incorrectly predicted by me last week. It makes much more sense to do it this week, because this is the final chance that she's got, especially, of course, as we had those inflation figures out today, giving the Chancellor a bit of good news. However, food inflation still very high, falling to 3.6% in October, lowest in 7 months, which just means that she has more money to spend on other things. So it's spending less money on our debt. Not all good news, of course. Energy prices rising, but still rising a little bit of a slower pace.
She can't go in on that, can she?
No, but I think she will go in on, here's my list of things that I would do if I were delivering a budget next week, and those are the things that I think you could do. And she's talked about this yesterday, saying, a cut to VAT on energy bills is something that the government have said that they will look at. Another idea is cutting some of the green levies, which are on household bills. That's been something that the Conservatives have liked to speak about, and they say that they would totally cut those, and that would save hundreds of pounds on energy bills, and that's something that the government promised during the election. The other thing I think she might mention, there's been some job losses up in a plant in Scotland, an ethane plant in Fife, 450 jobs at risk. That's been something that she, I think, might mention. She thinks that these jobs are going to exist, just not here in Britain, is linking that back to sort of the government's support of businesses, NICs, of course, and the energy price cap we are expecting to see set on Friday. So that might be something that she might lean into as well.
Any ambushes? Anything that would be... that she might... the figures about immigration, as we'll discover from John Byrne-Murdoch of the Financial Times later, have been rather horribly misrepresented by most of the media, and that normally means Kemi Badenoch will join in, so she might go with this idea of loads of people leaving the country.
Yes. Is that from the M&S, those statistics you're referring to?
Yes, who are now using a completely different way of measuring things, which is why some people have ended up rather confused about what the latest...
I see.
Yes,
she might do. She might do. It's obviously been a bit of a hot topic. People leaving the UK, and there's been a lot of speculation about whether Rachel Reeves is going to impose an exit tax next week.
And a mansion tax as well. That's back on again. The budget is basically a hokey-cokey at the moment.
It is.
You put a policy in, you take a policy out, in, out, you shake it all about, and we don't know what's going to happen.
We've got no idea. And, when you were mentioning this last week about how I had sort of changed my mind, saying, I do think it's going to happen. At first I didn't think it's going to happen, then I changed my mind.
This was the income tax rise.
Now
I was
right.
And then you were right.
And then I was wrong.
And then you're right.
And now I'm
Could you be
again.
wrong again? Or do you think
be.
this is definitely not going to happen?
I think everybody who I've spoken to have said if they feel like there's a way around it without breaking the manifesto promise, that's now the path that they want to take. So we're out again. But this is obviously the first PMQs that she'll have had to sort of make fun of that, and that might be something that she would choose to do in terms of that. And of course, we had Shabana Mahmood's immigration changes on Monday. She was very complimentary in the House of Commons on this, saying, we welcome most of these measures. They need to go far further. So, you've got this battle of ideas happening in government, in the Labour Party, in Reform about immigration and how we deal with it. And you've actually got so many political leaders.
Consensus.
Yeah, which all think the same thing. She was
the Lib
incredibly
Dems and the Greens who are, and most Labour voters who are repelled by it.
Yeah, exactly. So, Shabana Mahmood gave an incredibly punchy statement. And I wonder if Kemi would like to lead into a welcome of that. That would be something, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would be something. This is the point in the week where I remind you that we will cross with very little ceremony to the House of Commons as soon as the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch, gets to her feet and asks her first question. Was it last week that the fella miscounted, or was that the week before? I get so confused.
Before.
Was it?
Yeah. Although the Speaker still insisted that he did not miscount at the time, but so he says, "I'm the Speaker. I didn't count that." But yes, we never did find out whether he was going to use that final question for
Ed Davey.
immigration.
We keep saying every week we must remember to have a little look at what Ed Davies likes to do, because in many ways,
prepared for this.
What
do you think he will do today?
Trump has been particularly hideous this
for
week.
Sure.
Insulting journalists.
I
think he raised the BBC last week.
He did, so
but he may
leave
come
that.
back to it now that the chairman has made it clear they're not going going to bend the knee and pay any money at all for that appalling edit of the Panorama programme, but in the context of a speech in which the president lied and lied and lied and lied and lied again. So the notion that the edit did any reputational damage to a massive liar. Yeah. And then his behaviour in the Oval Office and on the plane telling a journalist to shut up, piggy, or words to that effect, and another one essentially threatening her in the actual Oval Office for asking
what was this one?
The Saudi leader about the journalist whose murder American intelligence believed that he greenlit.
That's something that I think, if I had to pick, that sounds like the Saudi case might be something
Ed Davey might have a little look at that. He has sort of raised the things that you might have historically. It's just hard to remember what it was like before 14 years of Tory Prime Ministers. But let's find out what she asks, and indeed what Ed Davey asks.
Thank you,
now.
Mr. Speaker. And can I associate our side of the House with the remarks the Prime Minister made about James Elliott? Can the Prime Minister tell us why his government is the first government in history to float increasing income tax rates only to then U-turn on it all after the actual budget?
Prime Minister. I'll inform you the budget's actually next week rather than after the budget. So we've got 1 week to go. But I can tell her it'll be a Labour budget, Mr. Speaker, with Labour values. That means we will concentrate on cutting NHS waiting lists, cutting debt, and cutting the cost of living. And because of the decisions we've already made, inflation is down this morning. The Bank of England have upgraded growth. We've got a record £230 billion of investment into this country under this government.
Mr. Speaker, he says the budget is next week, but we read all about it in the papers. This is the first budget to unravel before it's even been delivered. The Chancellor's cluelessness, I'm afraid, is damaging the economy now. The Prime Minister needs to end this shambles. So can he confirm today that he won't break another promise by freezing income tax thresholds?
Mr. Speaker, the budget is 1 week today and we will lay out our plans. But what we won't do, Mr. Speaker, I've said what we will do in terms of protecting the NHS and public services. What we won't do is inflict austerity on the country as they did. It's caused huge harm. What we won't do is inflict a borrowing spree like Liz Truss did, also inflicted and did huge damage. Mr. Speaker, have they learnt anything? She's apparently got a golden economic rule, I think. So it's a very important rule, this golden rule. There's this £47 billion of cuts with no detail. No wonder the Institute of Government says they're on very shaky foundations. They haven't listened and they haven't learned.
Mr. Speaker, it is quite clear that they are going to freeze thresholds. We didn't get a clear answer from them, but this is really important. Because in her budget speech last year, the Chancellor said, and I quote, "I am keeping every single promise on tax that I made in our manifesto. So there will be no extension of the freeze in income tax and national insurance thresholds." Why was freezing thresholds a breach of the manifesto last year, but it isn't this year?
Mr. Speaker, every week she comes along and speculates and distorts. Last year, Mr. Speaker, last year they predicted recession. And what did we get? The fastest growing economy in the G7 in the first half of the year. They opposed NHS investment, and what do we get? 5 million extra appointments in the first year of a Labour government. They tried growing the economy with millions on NHS waiting lists, with our schools crumbling and holes in our road. It didn't work. What do they want to do now? Go back to the same failed experiment.
Mr. Speaker, he talks about speculation. The only people who've been speculating are his government every single day for the last 3 months. And he mentioned inflation in his last answer. Inflation has nearly doubled since they came into office. He wants a round of applause because it's come down a little bit. I will remind him that food inflation is up 4.9%. That is making life miserable for all of those people out there. But let's go go back to thresholds because this is important. When the Chancellor made that promise to unfreeze the thresholds, it wasn't an off-the-cuff comment. She said it on the floor of this House in her budget speech. That was a deliberate statement of government policy. So if she breaks such a clear promise, how can the public trust the word that she says next week?
Mr. Speaker, she talks about inflation. It went to 11% on that. 11%, and the country is still paying the price. Inflation is down this morning, wages are up, and we've had 5 interest rate cuts, and that's because our fiscal rules are ironclad. And the leader of the opposition and the party officers have no credibility on the economy. She was Treasury Minister during the worst decline in living standards on record. And she said that Liz Truss got the mini-budget 100% right. Not much room for flexibility there. 100%, that's pretty full marks, Mr. Speaker. She might want to tell us if that's still her position, 100% right for Liz Truss.
Mr. Speaker, I was Treasury Minister at the height of the pandemic. We cleaned up that mess. Maybe he could clean up some of his own mess. And I'm going to repeat what the Chancellor said, because it's quite clear that the whole front bench has forgotten. She said, I have come to the conclusion that extending the threshold freeze would hurt working people. It would take more money out of their pay slips, and yet that's what they're planning to do next week. And all of this speculation is having real-world consequences. Just this morning, the UK chair of ExxonMobil said, and I quote, the government needs to understand that the whole industrial base of the UK is at risk unless they wake up and realise the damage their economic policies are doing. Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister tell us, is the loss of UK industry the price the country has to pay for having a clueless Chancellor?
Mr. Speaker, let me just say about ExxonMobil, it is a difficult time for the workforce there, and we must focus on supporting them. We've been meeting the company for over 6 months and explored every possible reasonable avenue. They've been facing losses for the last 5 years. It's best to do the detail before you chunter. And they're currently losing £1 million a week. But she talks about policy and approach. On energy policy, she follows reform. On the European Convention, she follows the man who wants her job. And when her shadow minister said we should deport people lawfully here to achieve cultural coherence, she pretended that it didn't happen. I could go on. She was the trade secretary that didn't sign any trade deals. Cheerleader for the mini-budget, cheerleader for open borders, and when they were crashing the economy, botching Brexit and running down the NHS, she was right at the centre. She hasn't got an ounce of credibility.
Mr. Speaker, on energy policy, what we are doing is listening to industry. What happened, I had a round table.
Mr. Slinger, please. We don't want to have to sling you out.
Mr. Speaker, just this morning, we heard from the chair of one of our largest energy companies. Last week, I had a round table with energy companies, and what they had to say about this Prime Minister and his energy secretary is unprintable. They are absolutely furious. Our oil and gas industry is dying, and he's standing there saying he had meetings. People out there are struggling, Mr. Speaker. The budget chaos is causing real anxiety. People aren't buying houses, businesses aren't hiring, and they are cancelling investment decisions. 2 weeks ago, the Chancellor called a ridiculous press conference to blame everyone else for her having to raise income tax. Then last week, she U-turned on her own U-turn. Instead, we can see they're planning to freeze income tax thresholds, something she said last year would be a breach of their manifesto. They are making it up as they go along. Doesn't the country deserve better than government by guesswork?
Mr. Speaker, either we renew our country with Labour or we go back to austerity 2.0 with reform of the Tories. They left waiting lists at record highs, almost 1 million more children in poverty, and they wrecked our public services. She comes here to talk down the country. We're turning the page. More NHS appointments, free breakfast clubs, free childcare, more homes and better public services. That's what we're fighting for, a Britain built for all.
Lord Houghton.
Mr. Speaker, standing in the heart of Weymouth, the Rectory is an iconic building. formerly a theatre, once a bustling cinema, and then a popular pub as well. And yet, for more than a decade, this building has stood empty. We want to turn this building into a thriving centre for arts and culture, hosting exhibitions and celebrating everything that makes Weymouth unique. So will the Prime Minister work with me and all the key players on the ground to revitalise the rectory and reopen this fantastic building for our town?
Prime Minister.
Well, my honourable friend is a brilliant champion for South Dorset, and he's right to champion revitalising our high streets. The Minister for Heritage would be delighted to discuss how we can get this iconic building reopened as he wants. I'm pleased that Weymouth secured £20 million in Pride in Place funding, giving his community the power and resources to make a real difference to people's lives.
Sir David, Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with the Prime Minister's opening remarks? And can I also join with him in congratulating Scotland on their amazing win against Denmark and wish them well in the World Cup? And can I also say I hope Wales soon qualifies to join England and Scotland? But Mr. Speaker, every year there are more than 300 suicides related to problem gambling. It affects hundreds of thousands of families, tearing them apart. Meanwhile, online gambling firms are taking in record revenues of over £7 billion a year. Now, ITV News are reporting that one of them, Sky Bet, is moving its headquarters to Malta so it can save tens of millions of pounds in corporation tax. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that it's time that we tax them on their UK profits so these online gambling firms don't escape wherever they are registered for tax?
Prime Minister.
Well, can I join him on wishing Wales well and Northern Ireland? I'd like to see all four nations in the finals. But look, he raises the really important issue of suicide, and it's Men's Health Day, and it is really important, and I think the whole House would want to work together on anything that can prevent suicide. I think if all of us think about individuals we may know who lost their lives through suicide, it's something that touches almost every one of us and all of our families as well. We will, of course, look at the link between suicide and gambling and take whatever measures we can to reduce suicide. It's a very important issue.
Sir David.
For his reply, and we look forward to the government coming forward with action on that. On another domestic matter, Mr. Speaker, next to the River Cherwell in Oxfordshire, a field is now covered in an enormous mound of rubbish, 150 metres long and up to 12 metres high. The water is now lapping against the waste and carrying it into the river. It's just one of many sites, Mr. Speaker, where organised criminal gangs are illegally dumping their waste onto our countryside and getting away with it. This is a shocking environmental emergency. So will he instruct the Environment Agency to clean it up now?
Firstly, these are utterly appalling scenes. Utterly appalling. A criminal investigation, as he knows, is underway, and specialist officers are tracking down those responsible. The Environmental Agency, in answer to his question, will use all available powers to make sure that the perpetrators cover the cost of the clean-up, which must now follow. We have boosted the Environment Agency's budget for tackling waste crime by 50%, given councils new powers to seize and crush fly tippers' vehicles, and lawbreakers can now face up to 5 years in jail.
Dominic.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Immigration is the number one issue on doorsteps of British
18 minutes after 12 is the time. PMQs comes to it, or at least the meat and drink of PMQs comes to a conclusion. Natasha and I will do our traditional sieving of the process after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
20 minutes after 12 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'll rattle through some text in a minute, but I kind of drifted off a bit there, Natasha. I hope you were paying attention.
You know I wasn't paying attention, James, because you were talking to me.
Should we find out what Keith thought? Keith, were you paying attention?
Yeah, what did you think?
First time for everything.
Yeah. Look, there were some bits in there. streeting on the front bench with his best...
Superb analysis.
Stop it.
I can confirm there were some bits in there.
There were some good bits
in
there.
It's not orange juice.
I don't like orange juice with bits in.
Yeah.
But it is probably more nutritionally value.
Go on.
It's not up to process.
Don't
anyway,
get distracted from our absence of insight.
Wes streeting on the front bench with his best smile on, obviously, after all of that briefing that was happening against him last week, coming from the heart of number 10. But yes, you're right, it was a little bit of a low-energy PMQs, wasn't it? I think my main takeaway is, Keir Starmer pointedly refusing to rule out extending the income tax threshold freeze. That was something...
But he always... I mean, it is from a punter's point of view. It's very unsatisfying. Will you confirm or deny that you're going to do
what
this
you're going to do in the budget?
I won't reveal anything at PMQs that we're going to... It's a bit undermined by the fact that Rachel Reeves keeps revealing what she is and then isn't and then is and then isn't and then is and then isn't and then is again going to do in the budget, either through briefings or press conferences. But Starmer never has, except that one time.
One time about 3 or 4 months ago.
Where does
that stop? I don't know where the line is. Is it September when the kids go back to school and they go, okay, now no budget speculation? But yes, Kemi Badenoch going in on income tax. Why on earth are you U-turning about it? She messed up the first line by saying all after the budget, rather than what she meant to say was this has all happened before the budget. So that was her first line and she totally fluffed it up. But yes, I think, look, the income tax threshold freeze, that's widely expected to happen. Everybody I've spoken to expects it to continue. It's a lot of money for the Chancellor. She's clearly not got that money in order to lift those thresholds at the moment. In fact, there were some people saying last week that actually it could be the opposite, that she could be actually looking to lower the threshold.
So we haven't got
which is crazy.
Nobody knows.
Well, it's just
anything could have. Mansion tax, lower thresholds, higher thresholds,
exactly.
No mansion tax, income tax,
no income tax. Yeah, we don't know.
VAT,
it's the hokey cokey
no money
budget.
Back, no guarantee. Black or white, rich or poor, he'll come knocking at your door. Sorry,
very good.
Carry on.
I think taxes are going to go up, but it just depends on how they're going to do it, right? And is it going to be a crucial breach of the manifesto promises or not? Those are the questions that are being asked at the top of government. And I think, like I say, speaking to everybody that I've been speaking to, if they can avoid breaking their manifesto promises in any way, they will. But they know they need to raise money. They know they need to raise a significant amount. And everybody I've spoken to thinks it's still going to be a painful budget. It's still going to be very difficult. It's still 20 to 30 billion pounds that she's got to fill of this black hole, even with the slightly better inflation news, meaning that she's got a bit more money to play with. This is going to be a really crucial moment for the government in the next sort of 7 to 10 days about how they ride this out. The one thing that I did think Keir Starmer was quite good at today, and which really got his backbenchers cheering, no return to austerity. That is the main argument that I think. If he can make that between now and this next budget, next week, that actually we've got no choice to do this because we refuse to go back to what the Tories did for 14 years, that is a strong argument. It resonates with the public, resonates with Labour voters. I think he should continue to make it.
Let's see what resonates with our listeners. I think Starmer seems rattled, says Alid. He's lost his composure and temper. I mean, it wouldn't be hard to lose your temper trying to debate with Badenoch, but still not a good look. And he forgot to mention Wales, the cheek of it. Wales got a result against North Macedonia in the World Cup, but they haven't yet qualified, so there would not really be much to congratulate them on, except beating North Macedonia 7-1.
Well, it was pretty stunning. What was the result in the end?
7-1 against North.
The last time I checked, Scotland. It was 4. No,
that was Scotland against Denmark.
Very good.
That was 4-2.
Very good. Well done.
And that was an extraordinary game of football, and
in.
It was World Cup qualification. So anyway, Alid,
understandable.
Can't expect congratulations.
Would have been nice.
Sam in Redhill, Kemi Badenoch is getting worse all over the place from question 1. Chris writes, I think often Mrs. Badenoch starts on a good topic. Do you know, I was saying, she started very well, and then she got her words wrong in the first question.
Yeah.
And she said before instead of after, or after instead of before.
After the budget instead of before. So it wasn't a great start, and she realised that.
I agree with him. She does start well, and she is better when she's calm, but she seems to stay on topic after either her point is made or after her point is defeated. She often seems to have nowhere else to go.
Yes, and I think actually what she should be a little bit more nimble and sort of, a little bit more flexible on her feet to say, actually, he's answered that question. That's not, releasing any answers. I'm going to go in a slightly different
Ed Davey does that rather well. Ed Davey sort of comes in with a completely different second question, a completely different follow-up, and therefore covers a lot more ground.
Exactly. But, I think she's right to press them on income tax. Why are you unravelling your own budget before you've even made it? Why was facing a breach of the manifesto in terms of your income tax threshold? She said that last year at last year's budget. She stood up and said, we're not going to do this. We're going to unfreeze these as soon as possible. And she still can't do that. On the economy, of course, Keir Starmer's got a good argument, Liz Truss, and that gets them up. That gets them the MPs on side every single time.
Voters don't seem to be taking it into account when assessing his government's performance.
No, I think people have short minds, don't they? Especially especially in politics. But what they were saying about sort of jobs, real world confidence, talking about the chair of ExxonMobil and what he's pointing the finger
what's that
at the
about?
government.
Well, I mean, that was a bit of an odd thing to say. I've been talking to energy bosses and they all think you're awful, but I can't tell you what they said.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so childish. Also, Unite the Union, last time I checked, I think this press release came out at the end of October, £30 billion a year in profits in the UK alone, and they're struggling, are they? According to the leader of the opposition.
Yes, this company is meant to be making job cuts, so and then they are blaming the government, the current industrial relations.
£30 billion a year in profits for UK energy companies, according to Unite the Union.
It's not the best example to use when there are obviously some
Won't
real
somebody
businesses.
think of the energy company bosses?
Well, I think we will be talking about energy costs next week, and that's clearly something that the
energy
Chancellor
company
wants to do.
profits as well.
Yeah.
You can't really do one without doing the other. I just thought that sounded very strange. It'd be like me saying to you, you'll never believe what Keith said about you. But I can't tell you.
I can just go and ask him. He'll probably tell me.
No, you can't. You're not allowed to.
Okay,
but I mean, that's what she sounded like. She said, they called you a big smelly woo-woo.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you what they said. Unprintable, while she was making a speech, not writing an article. But hey-ho. Kemi is just so awful, says Vic. I'm listening on your show. She comes across as arrogant and clueless, as bad as Starmer can be. Badenoch is just so easy for him to go up against. And Connor picks up on that point as well. Lots of people. Starmer has noticed that Badenoch performs well when she is calm. Wind her up, and then she heats and falters.
I think that's fair. And, when he was sort of picking on her, saying, stop chuntering or whatever in the middle there. I'm not sure I do like that word. But yes, chuntering. And then, she sort of starts to rise at it and then, raises her voice a bit. And I think you're completely right that it sort of takes the sting out of whatever she's trying to say, because she starts speaking quicker and starts sounding a little bit angrier / more hysterical, and that's just not a fantastic look for her. But yes, like I say, I think every week I'm agreeing with her on the topics that she chooses to go in on, how she chooses to do it. But I just don't. Her delivery is just not quite there yet.
It's almost like the problem is her.
Oh, I didn't say that. You did.
Isaac puts everything better than either of us have managed to do in the last few minutes. He writes, "This is terrible from Badenoch. She's asking questions about a budget which there is zero chance of Starmer answering because they will only be divulged at the budget. And she's getting cross on only question 2. This is going downhill faster than a Yorkshireman in a bathtub on a Sunday night in the 1980s. That is a popular culture reference that I am here for. That is a beautiful little bit of lyricism from Isaac, for which I thank you. Do you get that? You're too young to get that, aren't you?
Don't get it at all. What is it?
It's Last of the Summer Wine, one of the great staples of Sunday night television, which famously featured a Yorkshireman going down the hill in a bathtub in one famous episode.
Should we talk about Ed Davey while we've got a minute?
I feel so old when you don't get these popular culture references.
I'm sorry, I wasn't alive in the 80s.
Can you at least? That doesn't help.
I did. I started laughing, but then you literally asked me, "Do you remember it?" And I can't lie to you.
And let's just pop Paul in Idiot's Corner. He's been listening to the same programme that you have been listening to, and he writes, more racist bullying of Kemi Badenoch on now, because, yes, we have been focusing entirely on her ethnicity and her race while reading out messages criticising her performance in PMQs, you irredeemable flump. Ed Davey.
Davey, gambling firms and that huge mound of rubbish that's been building up in Oxfordshire. Actually, they're not too terrible un-Ed Davey friendly topics. We thought he might go on Donald Trump, but he did go on that last week and talked about Trump at the BBC, so maybe he was looking to do something slightly different. I thought the way the Prime Minister lowered his voice when he was talking about suicide and gambling is a little bit of a hint of maybe that the government next week will go ahead with some form of additional gambling tax, as has been reported. Talking about it as a very important issue, and we need to do more on it.
Trying to have their cake and eat it, aren't they, really? Because they're going to sell it as an attempt to reduce the likelihood of gambling-related problems. But, of course, if it's in the budget, it also gets framed as a revenue-raising exercise.
Yeah, exactly.
Can't do both.
But it's an easy win politically, and it's something that Gordon Brown, the former Chancellor, has been calling for yonks in order to try and pay for the 2-child benefit cap being uplifted, and they're trying to frame it around that. And on the River Chartwell, not a lot there. The Environment Agency will use all of their powers to stop this. Well, it's not going very well, is it? But it is.
What exactly has happened there? Do we know?
To be honest with you, I've not really been following it. But yes, big mound of rubbish not been cleared away.
Someone will know. They'll send me a text imminently, no doubt. So I think our original instincts were not by no means vintage.
No means vintage. A little bit lacklustre. A little bit of a flump. Would you say?
Well, I should stop using that again for a popular culture reference you won't recognise. There was a lovely children's programme called The Flumps.
Was it? Yeah. I remember the flumps being like a little sweetie, like a marshmallow that twisted round. Do you ever have that?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
But the Flumps was a nice
Flumps.
Television programme. They were sort of like furry balls with eyes on them, weren't they?
That sounds a bit creepy.
Oh, well, you need to see it. They were anything but. Thank you, Natasha. That was lovely. Making the best of a pretty bad hand, really, when it came to the politicians' performances. Here's Amelia Cox with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:34. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Natasha's mum has been in touch to correct us. It is not rubbish that we referred to. It's fly tipping. It's an epic amount of fly tipping. Weeks in the construction in a field between the river and the A34 in Oxford. That is what Ed Davey was talking about, just between the River Cherwell and the A34 near Kidlington. But it is not rubbish. It's illegal waste dumping and on an incredibly large scale and pretty close to becoming, if it hasn't already, an environmental emergency. So an excellent question. 12:35 is the time. Another apology for you as well. First of all, that one, thanks to Natasha's mum. And I misspoke earlier. I hate misspeaking, as you know. Kesar mangoes is not a brand name. Kesar. I said it was a brand name because my tin of mango pulp scores rather highly on my processed food app, as in it's rather good for you. So my recommendation was that you should use that for your smoothies or your sorbets or your ice cream. But Kesar is a sort of mango, not a brand name for the people that have canned it. Like Alfonso. I'm very partial to an Alfonso mango. Although Alfonso mango sounds like a sort of cartoon mafioso, doesn't it? If you were doing a cartoon strip about the mafia, Alfonso mango would have a kind of... anyway, Kesar, Kesar. We're going to run out of time, the producer has just written on the screen, if you don't hurry up and talk to Simon Marks. Simon Marks, hello.
Hello, James O'Brien.
It's Simon, it's Thursday, it must be Donald Trump. Although you are currently in South Africa, where, of course, Wednesday, where, of course, Donald Trump's reach is still felt.
Yes, very much so, James. I'm in Johannesburg at the moment because this weekend the Prime Minister will be here attending the G20 summit that is being hosted by President Cyril Ramaphosa. It's the first time ever that a G20 leaders summit has been held on African soil. Everyone's coming, but not American President Donald Trump, not even Vice President J.D. Vance, who thought he was coming until 10 days ago when Donald Trump, in a fit of pique, quite literally in a fit of pique, decided that he was going to nuke all U.S. government participation in this G20 summit over his repeated false claims that there is an unreported genocide being perpetrated against white Afrikaners in this country. He even at the White House yesterday spoke about the South African government's policy of extermination of people in South Africa as a justification for why he is not attending this weekend's G20 summit. But I think that there is, for the first time, pressure now that is being brought to bear on the international leaders who are coming, including the Prime Minister, to draw a line in the sand. We've heard this week from the South African Foreign Minister, who in an interview with CNN said that South Africa had now concluded that Donald Trump is pursuing a white supremacist agenda. And then yesterday here at a Bloomberg Business Forum, he challenged world leaders to go ahead and forge a declaration at this G20 summit without America. He said, we think that the G20 should send a clear message that the world can move move on with or without the USA. And there was immediate support for that from French President Emmanuel Macron. He's coming here on a state visit as well as attending the G20 this weekend. And he indicated through French officials that absolutely France supports the idea now of just saying, OK, well, if the Americans don't want to participate at a multilateral level in something like the G20, the rest of the world cannot simply abandon its efforts to forge some kind of international consensus. He said, look, the Americans were participating in the preparatory meetings until a couple of weeks ago when Donald Trump suddenly said we're not going in any form to South Africa for the G20. So I think we are beginning to see for the first time, the stirrings of international officials saying, look, if Donald Trump wants to withdraw himself, well, we got to just get on with it without him. And I think there's a bit of a challenge there for our own Prime Minister as he prepares to head here. How tough is he willing to get on the Trump administration? Because we've not seen vast amounts of that yet.
Just to clarify for people who don't follow things as closely as you, the link between the white supremacy agenda alleged by the South African minister, by Ronald Lamola, and the US policy is the idea of offering asylum to white farmers because they are being killed in huge numbers by black people, which is an obvious lie.
Yes. Well, the argument that the Americans make is that white Afrikaners are now being granted refugee status because they claim, the Americans claim, that the Afrikaners' farms are being expropriated without compensation by the South African government. That has never happened. Hasn't happened once. Separately, the US also says there is this unreported genocide taking place against Afrikaner farmers here. There is no unreported genocide occurring in South Africa. There's a lot of violent crime in South Africa. It affects all sorts of communities here. And in exactly the same way as the US government and the president are embracing these false narratives about South Africa, they've now started embracing similar false narratives about what's taking place in Nigeria, even to the point of President Trump within the last couple of weeks threatening military strikes on Nigeria over what he claims is a massacre, ongoing massacres of Christians in Nigeria. But if you actually look at the statistics, Christians are certainly being killed in Islamic fundamentalist terrorist assaults in Nigeria. But so are many people who follow the Muslim faith, and so are many people who follow other faiths in Nigeria. And in fact, the numbers are far greater in terms of the numbers of Islamic Nigerians that find themselves on the receiving end of that Islamic fundamentalist terrorist violence. So again and again, we see an American government making up policy based on disinformation.
And on we go. Nice words to say about the Saudi Arabian leader, though, who was in the Oval Office yesterday.
Well, I mean, it couldn't have gone any better for Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, a man who just in 2018 was a pariah following the murder and dismemberment of the Saudi-American journalist, the Washington Post contributor Jamal Khashoggi, who, of course, was murdered, according to the CIA, on the orders of Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman when he went into the into the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in order to get some paperwork for his imminent marriage. But Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman absolutely welcomed to the White House with full honours and a state dinner at the end of the day, and just an extraordinary standoff between President Trump and one reporter during the photo opportunity where the president sat alongside Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. One reporter who wanted to ask a very trenchant question. Let's take a listen.
Your Royal Highness, the U.S. intelligence concluded that you orchestrated the brutal murder of a journalist. 9/11 families are furious that you are here in the Oval Office. Why should Americans trust you? And the same to you, Mr. President.
Now, who are you with?
I'm with ABC News, sir.
You're with who?
ABC News, sir.
Fake news. ABC fake news. One of the worst in the business.
Well, that was Mary Bruce, a highly regarded White House correspondent for ABC News. You won't find any serious-minded journalist who thinks that she is fake at all. There are certainly many propagandists, as we've talked about before now, included in the White House press corps. She definitely is not one of them. And then President Trump went on completely to sanitize Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman over the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, and even to suggest that Jamal Khashoggi had it coming.
As far as this gentleman is concerned, he's done a phenomenal job. You're mentioning somebody that was extremely controversial. A lot of people didn't like that gentleman that you're talking about. Whether you like him or didn't like him, things happen. But he knew nothing about it, and we can leave it at that. You don't have to embarrass our guest by asking a question like that.
Absolutely extraordinary, given that Jamal Khashoggi was a dual Saudi-American citizen. He had an American passport, and his reputation being absolutely dragged through the mud, while the man that the CIA says authorized his murder found himself being burnished there at the White House yesterday.
And the CIA's findings, essentially the bit that Trump was describing as fake news, because that was the basis for the ABC journalist's question.
Yes.
So that's a US president rubbishing the CIA in front of a foreign despot to appease and delight a foreign despot.
Yes, and at other times he went even further. He talked glowingly about Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's record on human rights in Saudi Arabia, which is something that human rights organizations would definitely take issue with. But he also made it absolutely clear that what he wants from Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is Saudi money and Saudi investment. And it is worth making the point that his own son-in-law, Jared Kushner's private company, has benefited from a considerable infusion of Saudi cash. By the time that it was all over yesterday, President Trump at the banquet was telling people that the Crown Prince had agreed to invest $1 trillion in the American economy. It's almost time for your Dr. Evil impersonation again. It is being noted that Saudi Arabia's annual GDP is $1 trillion. So the idea that they're giving an entire year's worth of GDP to the United States seems somewhat fanciful, but there's no question that the Crown Prince yesterday played the American president like a violin.
Yeah, and of course somewhat questionable is the mother of all euphemisms. There's a poignancy there for people who cover the White, well, for anyone who calls themselves a journalist, because that was essentially saying that this great upholder of freedom of speech. I had the great privilege of presenting his widow with a Magnitsky Award for journalism, the awards that began life as a corrective to Vladimir Putin's propaganda, but now reach into many other parts of the world. And he has essentially said, Donald Trump there, that Khashoggi kind of had it coming.
Yeah, and James, just to put it into perspective, you'll know this, that his widow, Khashoggi's widow, is still trying to secure the return of her husband's body parts that are believed to be in Saudi Arabia, and was pressing the White House to raise the issue with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman yesterday. Well, you know, there is no prospect that issue was raised at all, and instead, tragically, his widow had to watch that performance by President Trump, disgracing the memory of her late husband, a widely respected journalist in Washington, D.C., lived in the Washington, D.C. area, but also, forging this new relationship with Saudi Arabia in which he made it absolutely clear, President Trump, that, it's time to move on. Stuff happens. We've got to move on. We've got to put it all behind us because it's all about the money now.
You won't know this because it's only dropped in the last hour, but Reuters have put together a list of 600 Americans punished by losing their jobs or other punishments for comments they made after the murder of Charlie Kirk and the murder of two Americans there, being viewed in very, very contrasting fashion by the state-sanctioned murder of one being passed off and passed over and excused by the American president, and then the terrorist murder of another, prompting severe punishments of anybody who dared to treat it with the same attitude that Trump has just displayed himself in the Oval Office to a murdered American journalist. Gosh, Simon.
Yeah, and it would be interesting to know, James, I've not seen that list. It would be interesting to know if all the people on that list openly celebrated Charlie Kirk's murder on social media, which obviously would be a heinous thing to have done, or because we know that in some cases people were losing their jobs for substantially less than that as the witch hunt continued in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's assassination. So that definitely is going to be
there's one example at the top of the article, a kindergarten assistant from South Carolina who quoted Charlie Kirk talking about gun deaths being a price worth paying for gun rights, and added the words thoughts and prayers. She's a former Christian missionary who's taken trips to Guatemala, who insisted that her call for prayer was sincere, but she lost her job a few days after that. She's among the 600, but you're quite right. Some of them would have made profoundly unpleasant comments, I imagine, but the question of whether they would be as unpleasant as Trump's comments about Khashoggi is now moot. What will happen? I haven't got long, so what will happen to that ABC journalist now?
Well, the president yesterday was saying that he thinks ABC should lose its license, and indicating that the FCC, the Federal Communications Chair, Brendan Carr, should take a look at it. I mean, we've heard similar language in the past, and it hasn't yet led to any broadcast network losing their license. But we've certainly seen at CBS, for example, the entire newsroom basically being co-opted by the Trump White House, forced to accept a pro-Trump bias monitor, and now, of course, being run editorially by Barry Weiss, who is suspected of having pro-Trump sympathies. So I think for ABC News, probably difficulties lie ahead.
And thank you, Simon Marks, live from South Africa, where he remains, as you heard, for that G20 summit. And he did an interview with G. Beebe's, where the interviewer told him that she felt much safer in Washington than she had done in London, despite the fact that you are, I think, 36 times more likely to be murdered in Washington than you are in London. So a fairly neat illustration there of the kind of, quotes, journalism, end quotes, that Donald Trump values and welcomes. It is 10-1.
James O'Brien on LBC.
12:53 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Let's crack on with a double bubble of missed information. We've got two, actually, which we're going to squeeze into the remaining moments of the programme. So with no further ado,
missed information.
Thank you, Emily. We begin with John Byrne-Murdoch, the columnist and chief data reporter for the Financial Times, an oasis of calm and evidence-based reporting in a sea of troubles. John, you drew my attention to the necessity of clarifying all of the headlines talking about a huge rise in the number of people leaving the country and a consequential drop in the net migration figures. What do my listeners need to know that perhaps they don't currently realise?
Yeah, hi James, thanks for having me. I think the key thing is that what's been the way this has been reported in some areas, not intentionally, I don't think, but it's been reported that the numbers of people, the numbers of British nationals leaving the country used to be around sort of 100,000, and suddenly they're at about 250,000. Now that sounds like there's been a big rise, but what's actually happened is the way these numbers are counted changed during 2021, and so the whole line, as it were, has been shifted upwards due to the new method. So if we actually look at the new data using that same new data, same new definition over the last few years, the number leaving, yes, it's been higher, about 250,000, but it's been fairly consistently at that 250,000 mark for each quarter over the last 3 years or so.
So it has absolutely nothing to do with Rachel Reeves, because it was happening in 2022, 2023 and 2024.
Certainly the data we have, and the latest numbers are for the year ending December 2024. There was a slight increase quarter over quarter during those 2-3 years, but very slight. And with these numbers, there are big error margins due to how they're calculated. So it's impossible we can't clearly say there has been a big rise. It's just that the numbers are larger than they used to be because we count them differently.
So they're counting them differently, and as a consequence of that, the quotes, rise end quotes, would have applied, well, the trend is roughly flat going back to 2021, 2022.
Exactly. You had a fairly flat line over the 10 years before. You've had a fairly flat line over the 3 years since. It's just that the second line is higher than the first because we've changed the numbers.
Thank you. I mean, that's huge compared to some of the coverage today, but I agree with you, oddly, and I'm glad that you pointed out that it probably isn't deliberate. Some of the attempts to link it to Rachel Reeves are obviously politically driven, but it's a misreading of the data rather than a deliberately politicised analysis. That's why I value your work so much, John, so I will thank you again for your constant quality and help in understanding issues. John Byrne-Murdoch there, columnist and chief data reporter for the Financial Times. And that's our first.
Missed information.
Now it's time for our second.
Missed information.
Although we haven't got much time, Emma Monk is here, the star of Monk Debunks on Substack and latterly a key contributor to Missed Information. I've only got 2 minutes. Do you want to do it now in 2 minutes, or do you want to come back tomorrow and have a bit more time?
Totally up to you.
Has Christmas been cancelled by Tesco?
Christmas has not been cancelled by Tesco, no.
Who said it has?
Various people on Twitter, and then The Telegraph, GB News, Daily Mail, The Express, Alison Pearson today, all claiming that Tesco's have cancelled Christmas because of some labelling on some boxes.
What's actually happened?
Tesco has put out a luxury range of Christmas trees, and rather than calling them all Christmas tree, they've described them as evergreen tree, pre-lit alpine tree, snowy pine cone tree, so people know the difference.
Because they've got 3 different types of tree, and if they called them all Christmas trees, you might go home with a snowy pinecone tree, when what you actually wanted was a thingamy tree.
Absolutely that, yeah. If you go on to the Tesco's website and search for Christmas tree, there are 1,874 possible options for Christmas tree. There are still lots of Christmas trees on Tesco's, just these 3 in their luxury range have been called what they represent, rather than actually putting the word Christmas on the box. And apparently that is now woke, and Tesco is cancelling Christmas because the word Christmas wasn't on the box, even though it was on the pallet underneath and the sign above.
So those photographs of the proof that Christmas has been cancelled by Tesco that contain the word Christmas?
Contain the word Merry Christmas, yep. The original photograph had that cropped out, obviously, which is what caused the...
on Twitter, and none of the journalists, to use the word very loosely, that you've just described as having reported on this story, bothered to track down the uncropped photo.
Oh, no, interestingly, The Express used the uncropped photo. Under major supermarkets, evergreen tree name change sparks the fury of Christmas shoppers, and they actually used the photo that included the word Merry Christmas. Wow.
Right, well, that's the good news. Christmas hasn't been cancelled, but Emma, no. we may speak to you before the good day dawns, because we're going to have to add a yet to that. Christmas hasn't been cancelled yet, but we'll keep an eye on things, and we're very grateful to you. You must have a look at Emma's Substack, Monk Debunks. She is constantly seeking to clarify the truth behind the dodgy headlines, although they're rarely dodgier than that. Basically, a racist Twitter trope ending up in all of the media outlets that Emma just alluded to. And that is the end of your second
Missed information.
What were you doing there, Keith? Having a Kit Kat. That's it from me for today. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on our free app, the Global Player, or the LBC app, where you can stay up to date on the top stories and opinions. Loads of podcasts there as well, including mine, both of which are absolutely brilliant. So do download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Tom will be with you at 4 on LBC, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.